the ice and fire demon god of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226, Hermione's worldview collapses. The third-year wizards of Gryffindor College attended Hagrid's Care of Magical Creatures class on the first morning after school started. On the way to the Care of Magical Creatures class, Irina whispered to Hermione beside her, "Hermione, did anything happen in the castle during the week I was away on Christmas?" Hermione thought for a moment and said, "If there are more important things, there are two. One of them is that Harry got a firebolt as a Christmas gift. But think about it, Irina, who would give Harry such an expensive gift as a firebolt?" Irina, who already knew the answer, pretended to think and whispered, "Could it be Sirius Black?" Hermione said, "That's what I guessed. I'm worried that the firebolt Harry received would have a curse cast by Sirius Black." Irina asked, "So, you reported this to Professor McGonagall, right?" Hearing this, Hermione couldn't help but say in surprise, "How do you know? Did Harry and Ron tell you about this?" Irina said helplessly, "I guessed." Hermione, although you reported this to the professor for their own good, you should also understand the importance of the firebolt to those boys. I think Harry and Ron are probably still blaming you now. Telling tales is often the most annoying thing for students, and students who tell tales are always rejected by others. But Hermione reported this to Professor McGonagall not because she wanted to show her presence in front of the professor, or because she wanted to see Harry make a fool of himself. She just wanted her friend's safety to be guaranteed, and didn't want to put her friends in danger. Whether from the facts or emotions, everything Hermione did was to protect Harry and Ron, her two friends. Irina didn't want Hermione to be hated by Harry and Ron because of this. But what if there is really a curse on the firebolt? We can't just watch Harry almost fall from the sky like the year before last, can we? Hermione argued. Irina said, "I know what you did was right, but you also know that Harry and Ron are like children, always impulsive and irrational. But they are our friends after all. To consider their feelings, I think you should apologize to them." Hearing Irina's words, Hermione was silent. As smart as she was, how could she not know that she had ignored Harry and Ron's feelings before? Exclamation mark. However, she still had a touch of pride belonging to a genius in her heart, so she couldn't just give in to Harry and Ron. Now with Irina's mediation, Hermione finally nodded. She looked at Harry and Ron who were chatting together not far away, and whispered, "I see. I will apologize to them later." Seeing that Hermione seemed a little depressed, Irina changed the subject and said, "By the way, Hermione, Harry receiving the firebolt is one thing, so what about the second thing?" After hearing Irina's question, Hermione's mood did not recover, but became even more depressed. She only whispered, "Malfoy's father complained about Hagrid's protection of magical creatures class. Although Hagrid was confirmed to be not responsible under the guarantee of Professor Dumbledore, Buckbeak will be sent to trial." Irina scratched her head. Her words seemed to have the opposite effect. Hermione seemed a little excited. She said, "Buckbeak is just an innocent hippogriff. Malfoy is asking for trouble. However, Buckbeak will be sent to the Dangerous Animals Committee in April. I looked up many files related to the Dangerous Animals Act during the Christmas holidays. However, except for the monsters that were so powerful that the wizards could not do anything, there was not a single case where the magical creatures were not guilty." Hearing this, Irina's expression also became serious. Although in the original book, Buckbeak was secretly released by Harry and his three friends after they went back to the past using the time converter, Buckbeak later became a shady existence and could no longer walk in front of wizards as openly as before. This was what Irina did not want to see. Perhaps that's the arrogance of wizards. In the eyes of wizards, the lives of magical animals are so cheap. With the power of the Malfoy family, it is far beyond the ability of us little wizards and Hagrid to resist. I think, even if we have enough evidence to prove Buckbeak's innocence, Malfoy's father can bribe the officials of the trial and sentence it guilty." Irina said softly. At this time, the group had arrived at the edge of the paddock, and everyone could see Hagrid's figure. Why? That's the Ministry of Magic. Shouldn't they enforce the law impartially? If we have enough evidence, how can Malfoy's father influence the result of the trial? Hermione said in disbelief. She felt that her worldview was about to collapse. Whether it was when she first came to the magic world or now, Hermione attached great importance to the so-called rules. Although under the influence of Harry and others over the years, she no longer regarded the school rules as an imperial decree as before, she still trusted the laws of the magic world. But now, Irina told her that a powerful force could distort the law and influence the decision of the Ministry of Magic. How could she accept this? Exclamation mark. During the Hogsmeade week before Christmas, you should have heard the conversation between Fudge and the others, right? Think about it. Even Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, disregarded the lives of the residents of Hogsmeade for his own selfish desires, and allowed the Dementors to wander freely in the place where wizards lived, let alone those ordinary officials of the Ministry of Magic. Irina said so. Hermione looked up suddenly. From Irina's words, she extracted a piece of information. That is, Irina was also present at the Three Broomsticks that day. Otherwise, she would never have been able to describe the content of Fudge's conversation in such detail. Looking at Hermione's eyes, Irina spread her hands and said, as you think, Lin and I were also in the Three Broomsticks that day. We sat at another table. We could see clearly where you, Ron and Harry, as well as Fudge and the others were. After figuring out everything, Hermione showed a dejected look. In this case, then Buckbeak is finished. Hermione said desperately. Irina sighed. She also didn't want Buckbeak to be put on trial. But how could she, a muggle born, fight against the power of the Malfoy family? Exclamation mark. Unless the power of the 28 sacred pureblood families took action. Wait, the 28 sacred pureblood families, the Rowell family? Exclamation mark. Irina suddenly realized that she had been thinking about the power of herself and Hermione, and she was in a dark situation. She actually ignored the Rowell family well and was. You know, whether it is Lin's Rowell family or Irving's Farley family, they are all one of the 28 sacred pureblood families. However, Irina was unwilling to force them. After all, neither Lin nor Irving had the obligation to use their family's power for a hippogriff. Chapter 227, Decomposition of Ancient Magic. Especially Iwin, only using his own strength to fight the resistance without endangering his family. That was the oath Iwin made when he joined their team. In this case, Irina had no position to ask Iwin to use the power of his family. As for Lin, although their relationship has always been good, it depends on Lin's own idea to use family relationships to help Buckbeak escape the crime. After all, Lin has been caring for her for the past 2.5 years. She can't even thank him enough, so how can she ask him to help her? Exclamation mark. At this time, Irina and Hermione had already arrived at the venue, and Hagrid was calling the little wizards together. The climate in the morning in January in the UK is always damp and cold, and almost all the little wizards are unwilling to stay in such an uncomfortable place for 2 hours. However, perhaps Hagrid wanted to make them happy, and the teaching material he chose for this class was many salamanders. Hagrid lit a bonfire, and the bonfire was full of those salamanders. Under Hagrid's command, Irina and others collected firewood and leaves, and threw them into the bonfire, to keep the flames burning. The fire-loving salamanders jumped around in the crackling firewood. Most of the little wizards thought Hagrid's class was very interesting. Although salamanders could not compare with hippogriffs like Buckbeak, playing with fire with salamanders was much more interesting after the boring things like feeding lettuce to flobberworms. After Hagrid's magical creature care class, Hermione sincerely apologized to Harry and Ron. In fact, Harry and Ron also understood that Hermione did this for their sake, but they were too embarrassed to reconcile with Hermione. Now that Hermione took the initiative to apologize and gave them a way out, Harry and Ron naturally accepted her apology with pleasure, and also reflected on their mistakes, and apologized to Hermione. With Irina's mediation, a dispute that was unnecessary was resolved. Harry and his friend's second class was divination. Since Irina only chose care of magical creatures as an elective, she didn't need to go to class with them. The same was true for Lin. The second big class for 4th year Slytherin was Muggle Studies, but Lin only chose Ancient Runes as an elective. In fact, among the 5 grades of Slytherin wizards, there were probably less than 5 who chose Muggle Studies. and it was most likely that these less than 5 people did not want to study muggle studies, but wanted to get all the OWL certificates like Hermione did. In this empty class, Lin and Irina came to the room of requirement at the same time. "Hey, are you here to practice ancient magic too?" Irina asked curiously, looking at Lin who was walking from the other side of the corridor. Lin En said, "Almost. I plan to decompose the various parts of the ancient magic of Purgatory Demon Golem, such as the 2 links of extracting the special magic power from hell and condensing the Purgatory Demon Golem weapons. I think they can exist as a powerful modern magic alone. Ancient magic can be simplified into some modern magic, such as Purgatory Demon Golem can be simplified into the current flame spell. However, the modern magic that Purgatory Demon Golem can be simplified into is not only the flame spell. Summoning flames with the ancient magic of Purgatory Demon Golem is only the first and most obvious step of this ancient magic, and it can even be said that it has no difficulty. What Lin En has to do is to simplify the magic skills contained in other links of Purgatory Demon Golem into a new and powerful magic." Irina nodded, not quite understanding. She walked to the wall where the room of requirement was located and walked back and forth 3 times. "I need a room to practice magic," Irina hummed softly. Soon, a door with a metallic luster appeared on this originally empty wall. Lin En and Irina pushed the door open and entered. The room was a very spacious place, 2 or 3 times larger than the auditorium. At the end of the room, there were many training dummies that had not yet been activated. Irina found a corner to sit down and continued the process of converting magic power into ice power. With Irina's affinity for ice element, she was fully able to convert all the magic power in her body into ice power again in these 2 hours, to increase the reserve of ice power in her body. On the other side, Lin En came to the front of the training dummies. He gently swung his right hand holding the magic wand, and a dreamlike voice came out of his mouth. The temperature around Lin En dropped rapidly, and even a thin layer of frost condensed on the surface of the training dummy several meters away from him. Then, Lin En could feel a strong evil thought appearing from the top of his magic wand, which was a special magic power flashing with grey light. Since Lin En did not create the body of the Purgatory Demon Golem, this special magic from hell had no carrier as its destination. It floated in the air, constantly emitting the malice from hell. Even as the summoner of this grey magic, Lin En also frowned after feeling the strong malice from this grey magic. This special magic from hell is not one of the powers that Lin En has ever seen. Fortunately, as the summoner of this grey magic, Lin En can still simply control this grey magic, otherwise even Lin En might not be able to restrain it. In the ancient magic of the Purgatory Demon Golem, its function is to give the flame carrier a soul, but if it is extracted separately, then it may be able to do more than that. Thinking of this, Lin En waved his magic wand and threw this grey magic onto a training dummy not far away. He intended to test whether this grey magic itself had the lethality to external objects. However, after hitting the training dummy, this grey magic immediately merged into the training dummy. Then, 2 balls of blue will-o'-the-wisp fire ignited in the eyes of the training dummy, and the training dummy also moved. The training dummy walked in front of Lin En and stood in front of him. Seeing this scene, Lin En couldn't help but be a little surprised. He tentatively ordered, "Lie down." As Lin En's voice fell, the training dummy immediately fell backwards, and the whole wooden body hit the ground, splashing some wood chips. After witnessing this scene in full, Lin En had a clearer understanding of the role of this grey magic. It seems that this grey magic from hell itself carries a special property that can give souls to non-living things. And the non-living things that Lin En has given souls with this special magic from hell will become Lin En's puppets and only obey Lin En's orders. Chapter 228, Prison Flame Martial Arts. Of course, Lin En guessed that the ability of this grey magic to give souls to non-living things is limited, and I'm afraid that not all objects can be given souls by it. For example, the relics of the 4 giants of Hogwarts, such as the Gryffindor Holy Sword, and the evil items such as Horcruxes, that already have soul fragments. Lin En guessed that such items cannot be given souls by grey magic. Of course, practice makes perfect. Without specific tests, these are just Lin En's guesses. This special magic from hell will give the other party a soul that is completely loyal to me after contacting non-living things. So what if it is allowed to contact living things? Lin En thought so, but there were no other living things in the room, except Lin En and Irina. It seems that this experiment will have to wait until the Forbidden Forest is tried later. Lin En thought to himself. After trying to decompose the part of the ancient magic of the purgatory demon golem that summons the magic from hell, Lin En has become more and more familiar with the process of simplifying ancient magic. If Mr. Farley were here, he would be very surprised. After all, ordinary people don't even have the ability to learn ancient magic by reverse deduction, let alone simplify ancient magic, and even if they are geniuses, most of them can only learn ancient magic. Thousands of years ago, those wizards who were able to simplify ancient magic into modern magic that is more suitable for ordinary wizards were all Demon King level wizards like Dumbledore and Grindelwald. If you don't have enough understanding of magic and have a certain amount of experience, how easy is it to simplify complex and profound magic? Exclamation mark. In fact, even Lin En's simplification of the magic of purgatory demon golem is not to master its essence. He simplified the ancient magic at the bottom logic. He only decomposed its steps and turned the single steps into separate magic. At this time, Lin En waved the wand in his hand again, and he began to try to condense the weapon of purgatory demon golem directly out of thin air. When he was making the purgatory demon golem before, he was somewhat amazed by the weapon in the purgatory demon golem's hand, especially when the purgatory demon golem attacked the iron block that Lin En had transformed with transfiguration. The flame that suddenly ignited on the weapon was equivalent to the enchantment effect after Lin En had engraved dozens of alchemy arrays. In other words, the weapon of the purgatory demon golem was completely equivalent to the product of the combination of magic alchemy and array alchemy. The process of the form formed by the flame that was concentrated to the extreme was similar to that of magic alchemy, and the characteristics it showed in battle were similar to those of array alchemy. As an alchemist, Lin En was naturally interested in this kind of flame weapon that could be condensed in just a few minutes, but the effect was comparable to the alchemy weapon that Lin En spent a whole day to refine. Lin En's face was solemn, and he saw a ball of fire suddenly ignited in front of him, and it was compressed rapidly towards the center. He did not transform the compressed flame into the body of the purgatory demon golem, but directly forced it to condense into the shape of a spear. However, although the flame had formed the shape of a flame spear, its surface did not turn into a dark black mist like in the hands of the purgatory demon golem, but still burned like a real flame. Lin En understood that it was because of the lack of that special magic power from hell. When he refined the purgatory demon golem before, the purgatory demon golem was formed into a black mist weapon. After he injected that special magic power from hell, Lin En hesitated for a moment, and he chanted the obscure and complex spell again. Soon, a ball of grey magic appeared on the top of Lin En's magic wand again. Lin En did not directly inject this ball of grey magic into the flame spear. This flame spear was not the body of the purgatory demon golem. He did not know what would happen after injecting this power that could give souls to non-living things into the flame spear. After all, this flame spear could not act like the purgatory demon golem, and naturally could not carry a soul. It should be okay if we make all the preparations. Lin En thought for a moment and took out a magic forbidden staff. Once he injected the grey magic power into the flame spear would undergo uncontrollable changes. Then he would activate the magic forbidden staff and use the power of the magic forbidden staff to forcibly extinguish the flame spear and annihilate the grey magic power. Lin En held the magic forbidden staff tightly in his left hand and pushed the magic wand forward slightly with his right hand. The grey magic power was pushed into the flame spear and merged with the flame spear. The flame spear, which was originally burning with red flames, suddenly became as black as ink, and the burning flames completely disappeared. Not only that, the metallic luster could be seen on the spear that had turned into a black. Seeing this, Lin En breathed a sigh of relief. The current state of the spear was the same as it was in the hands of the purgatory demon puppet. This was the best result. But even so, Lin En did not let down his guard easily. The magic forbidden staff was still held in his hand. Lin En put away his magic wand, stretched out his right hand, and grabbed the pitch black spear in his palm. The moment he got the spear, the method of using it appeared in Lin En's mind. The pitch black spear was cold, just like cold metal, but Lin En knew that it was made of pure flames. The magic power from hell transformed its shell and made it look like it is now. As long as Lin En had a thought while waving the spear could be transformed into a flame spear at any time. The red flame could burn at any part of the spear, including the tip, the body and the handle, according to the will of the spear holder. Not only that, the spear holder could even let the flame contained in the spear break away from the spear and attack, which is the so-called spear light and thread. It is worthy of being an ancient magic. Even the composite magic that is decomposed is so powerful. Lin En couldn't help but admire. If only Lin En could achieve the above effects when using this pitch black spear, then Lin En would not think it was a big deal. After all, with Lin En's affinity for fire, he could completely do this with his own fire spell. However, the above effects are not about Lin En, but the one holding the spear. Yes, every wizard holding this weapon can do the same to the same extent, launching a fierce attack with the flames contained in this pitch black spear. This is the strength of this composite magic. Let's call this magic hell flame refining martial arts. Lin En nodded slightly and said with satisfaction. The combination of the special magic power from hell and the red flames, which refines a weapon that burns everything, is really the most appropriate name for this magic hell flame refining martial arts. Chapter 229 I can't make decisions for others without permission. After Lin En simplified the ancient magic purgatory magic puppet to create a new magic hell flame refining martial arts, he was ready to leave the room of requests and go to the auditorium for lunch. While trying these two different magics, the 2 hours of the second class in the morning had passed and it was time for lunch. Unfortunately, Lin En was unable to complete the comprehensive test of the grey magic from hell, which made it temporarily impossible for him to name the magic evolved from the grey magic. Lin En put away the black spear and the magic forbidden staff. This black spear made by the hell flame refining martial arts is not as unsolvable as the purgatory magic puppet. When it is left still, the flame magic contained in it will be consumed within a month, and this black spear will also go out. In the case of fighting, the flame of this black spear will be consumed even faster, and it can't even hold up a protracted battle. Perhaps this is the difference between modern magic and ancient magic. Ancient magic was powerful and had almost no flaws, while modern magic may be powerful in some aspects. Its flaws are also obvious. Even the Avada Kedavra, known as a death curse, has a fatal flaw, which is that it can be blocked by objects such as boxes and walls. Lin cast his eyes on Irina, who was sitting in the corner transforming magic power. At this time, Irina seemed to have completed the process of transforming magic power into ice power. She stood up and stared at him with her beautiful ice blue eyes. If there is nothing else, then let's go, Lin said, and he turned around and planned to walk towards the door of the room of requirement. Irina stood there and hesitated for a while, and she called Lin. Wait, Lin. Lin turned around in confusion and looked at her with an inquiring look. Irina hesitated for a while and finally told Lin that Buckbeak was about to be judged by the Ministry of Magic's Dangerous Animals Committee and hoped to get Lin's help. Actually, I know there's no need to bother you with this kind of thing. After all, Harry and the others will let Buckbeak go in the end. But I don't want Buckbeak to hide forever in a place where wizards can't see him. Well, if you don't want to, then just pretend I didn't say anything, Irina whispered. She didn't hold much hope for this matter. However, facing Irina's request, Lin En did not immediately agree or refuse. Lin En held his chin, as if thinking about something. After a while, he looked at Irina and said, the Rowell family can help with this matter, but they won't help too much. For now, the Rowell family cannot tear their faces with the Malfoy family, which is also one of the 28 pureblood families. You should know this. Hearing this, Irina nodded repeatedly and said, understood. It's the best thing that you can help. As for the outcome, it depends on fate. Tell me what you think, Lin. Lin said lightly. You also said that Lucius Malfoy's initial target was not Buckbeak, but Hagrid. But because Professor Dumbledore vouched for Hagrid, Hagrid was deemed not responsible, which made the spearhead of this incident pointed at Buckbeak. Irina frowned slightly. She seemed to understand something. You mean, let Lucius Malfoy shift his attention back to Hagrid and ignore Buckbeak, the magical animal despised by wizards? Lin nodded and said, yes, I can ask my mother to write to those Ministry of Magic officials who have interests with the Owl family and ask them to shift the focus of the case back to Hagrid, and write another letter to Lucius Malfoy asking him to give up the accusation against Buckbeak on the condition that Hagrid takes responsibility. In this way, Buckbeak will. But Hagrid is also my friend. Even if Hagrid is willing, I can't let Hagrid be imprisoned in a hellhole like Azkaban for Buckbeak. Before Lin finished speaking, Irina interrupted excitedly. Although she and Hagrid are both people who love magical animals, she can still distinguish the importance of things. No matter what, people are always more important than magical animals, not to mention that, even if she does nothing, Buckbeak will not be really killed. You misunderstood. Seeing Irina's look, Lin En shook his head helplessly and chuckled. Don't forget, Professor Dumbledore has vouched for Hagrid. With Professor Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of this century and the chief wizard of the Wizengamot, personally coming forward, even if the spearhead is pointed at Hagrid, what can be done? Hearing this, Irina was stunned. Yes, with Professor Dumbledore personally coming forward to vouch for Hagrid, even if Hagrid is found to be responsible for this incident, the most punishment Hagrid will face is suspension for inspection. Even the Ministry of Magic, which is so corrupt, would never dare to throw the person who personally vouched for Dumbledore into Azkaban in front of Dumbledore. After all, that kind of behavior is tantamount to tearing his face with Dumbledore. Even Cornelius Fudge would never dare to do so, in order to protect his popularity. I'm sorry, I got emotional. Irina said to Lin guiltily. She misunderstood him, even though he was helping her. Lin waved her hand and said seriously, I will try my best to reduce the responsibility that Hagrid needs to bear. If Hagrid is suspended for inspection, I can also ensure that he will be reinstated at the beginning of the next school year. Irina nodded slightly. With the passing of Christmas, the school year is already halfway through. If he is only suspended for half a year, and then everything will be fine, then this plan is acceptable to her. However, I still have to discuss it with Hagrid. Even if Hagrid is my friend, I can't decide his fate without authorization. Irina said so. Lin smiled dotingly and said, of course. After having a more complete plan, Irina looked much happier. After the lunch, Irina did not return to the Gryffindor common room for a nap, but left Hogwarts Castle and headed towards Hagrid's hut. After knocking on the door a few times, Hagrid opened the door for her. Irina told Hagrid about her and Len's plan and asked for Hagrid's opinion. After learning that Buckbeak would be safe as long as he was willing to take responsibility, Hagrid immediately showed an ecstatic look and agreed to Irina's plan without hesitation. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230, Gnashing Teeth and Swallowing. Unlike Hermione, who was not experienced in the world, Hagrid, who had been wronged for decades, had a clear understanding of the corruption and arrogance of the Ministry of Magic. If Buckbeak, a magical creature, was sent to the Dangerous Animals Committee for trial, Hagrid was sure that Buckbeak would not escape death. But now, Irina told him that, as long as he was willing to pay the price of suspension for half a year, he could get Buckbeak's peace. How could Hagrid, who always loved magical animals, refuse? Exclamation mark. Thank you. Lin is also a good boy. If he is unwilling to help, Buckbeak may be finished. It is so innocent. Hagrid blew his nose hard and sobbed. After getting a positive reply from Hagrid, Lin sent the letter he had written in advance to his mother Irina. Although the Rao Manor was completely closed for 11 years after Lin's father Hendry Rao was killed, the Rao family's family businesses distributed outside were still operating normally in the hands of the agents once appointed by the Rao family. After Lin received the admission letter from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and entered Hogwarts Castle, Rowena also played her strong woman's means, contacted all the industrial agents in a swift and resolute manner, and recovered the scattered industries. Even those Ministry of Magic staff who had originally had interests with the Rao family, but cut off contact because of Voldemort, also established a cooperative relationship with the Rao family again under the temptation of huge interests. In this case, it is not difficult for the royal family, which is still huge today, to just exonerate a hippogriff despised by wizards. Even the biggest obstruction, Lucius Malfoy was promised by Rowena to let the Ministry of Magic staff controlled by the royal family support the Malfoy family's accusation against Hagrid, and chose to give up the accusation against Buckbeak, a magical animal that he saw as dirty and lowly. On the other hand, after learning that the Ministry of Magic once again determined that Hagrid was responsible for the incident in which Malfoy was injured by the hippogriff, Dumbledore frowned. But just when Dumbledore was about to go to the Ministry of Magic to find out why the Ministry of Magic had changed its mind in just a few days, Hagrid knocked on the door of the headmaster's office and told Dumbledore that he was willing to take some responsibility. Professor Dumbledore, if they can get Buckbeak off the hook by pointing the finger at me, then I'm willing to take that responsibility, Hagrid said to Dumbledore sincerely. After hearing Hagrid's words, the mystery that had been condensed in Dumbledore's mind was completely solved. Dumbledore sorted out his thoughts and said in a daze, I understand. It seems that someone helped you, Hagrid. With my guarantee, they dare not punish you too severely, and pointing the finger at you can exempt Buckbeak from responsibility. It's really smart. Dumbledore chuckled and shook his head. He didn't expect that he had a part in these links. Can you tell me who helped you? Dumbledore looked at Hagrid with an inquiring look. Hagrid hesitated for a moment, but shook his head and said, I'm sorry, Professor Dumbledore, maybe they don't want to make this public. Even though Professor Dumbledore was Hagrid's most trusted elder, as Irina said before, Hagrid was also unwilling to make decisions for others without authorization. Before Lin and Irina took the initiative to talk about this matter, just for Buckbeak, Hagrid would not talk about this matter everywhere. Hearing this, a gleam flashed in Dumbledore's blue eyes behind his half-moon glasses. Although Hagrid did not tell him the answer, from Hagrid's tone and a few words, he had roughly guessed the identity of the person who helped Hagrid. Dumbledore smiled and said, it's a good thing to be willing to keep a secret for someone who helped you. You can go back, Hagrid. I won't interfere with the Ministry of Magic's decision again. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Hagrid finally breathed a sigh of relief. Even though Hagrid is now a formal professor at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, he still feels like a student meeting a teacher when facing Dumbledore. After Hagrid left the principal's office, everything in Hogwarts Castle and the Ministry of Magic was proceeding in an orderly manner. Soon, a week passed. There was new news from the Ministry of Magic every day. After Rowena and Lucius Malfoy reached an agreement, the Ministry of Magic's Dangerous Animals Committee sent Hagrid a letter about the decision to withdraw the trial of the hippogriff, which made Hagrid so happy that he sobbed. In the next few days, the Ministry of Magic officials controlled by the Malfoy family and the Rowell family worked together to overturn the original finding of Hagrid's innocence, believing that Hagrid should be responsible for Malfoy being injured by the hippogriff. However, with Dumbledore, the chief wizard of the Wizengamot, as a guarantor for Hagrid, even though Hagrid went to the Ministry of Magic for trial at the request of the Ministry of Magic's letter, the final result of the trial was only to suspend Hagrid for inspection and fine him 5,000 gold galleons in compensation. The compensation of 5,000 gold galleons was not a problem for Hagrid, whose carpets were made of unicorn hair, and the suspension inspection could not cause Hagrid much damage. After all, Hagrid only became a formal professor at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry this year, and the suspension inspection was just a matter of returning to his gamekeeper position. After learning the result of Hagrid's trial, Lucius Malfoy realized that he had been cheated. Just like Irina in the room of requirement that day, Lucius Malfoy only wanted to put Hagrid on trial, but forgot that with Dumbledore's guarantee, Hagrid would never be imprisoned in Azkaban. No matter how much Lucius Malfoy regretted it, at this point, both Hagrid's case and Buckbeak's matter had been settled, and even Lucius Malfoy could only grit his teeth and swallow it. Shifting the perspective back to Hogwarts Castle, another event was held in the Quidditch field this week. This was a match between the Slytherin Quidditch team and the Ravenclaw Quidditch team, and in this match, the Slytherin Quidditch team narrowly defeated the Ravenclaw Quidditch team with a very small difference. In addition, Harry continued to learn the Patronus charm from Professor Lupin during this period. Originally, Harry didn't understand what Lin meant by Professor Lupin being able to help him improve his Patronus charm. But when he took a class where Professor Lupin taught him the Patronus charm, he understood. In addition to the boggart used in class, Professor Lupin actually found another boggart. In addition, Harry's biggest fear at the moment was Dementors, so the boggart that appeared in front of Harry was in the shape of Dementors. With Dementors as practice objects, Harry's Patronus charm naturally improved rapidly. Chapter 231 Substitute Professor. During this period of practice, Harry no longer fainted because of the Dementors, and the silver white mist he released could also repel the Dementors to a certain extent. Not only that, the silver white mist released by Harry after chanting the Patronus charm seemed to have a tendency to condense in the direction of a certain shape, and Harry could already see the outline of a majestic animal. After discovering this, not only Harry, but also Professor Lupin was extremely happy. Although the silver white mist only showed a silver white outline, how could he not recognize the shape of this animal after being friends with James Potter for decades? Exclamation mark. There is no doubt that when Harry truly condenses the form of the Patronus and releases the complete Patronus, then the appearance of this Patronus must be the same as his father James Potter, a stag. After leaving Professor Lupin's defense against the dark arts class, Harry found Ron, Hermione and Irina, and planned to visit Hagrid. Under the covert operation of the Rowell family, Hagrid's conviction and suspension for inspection were not widely publicized, so Harry didn't know about it yet. And Irina naturally didn't tell Harry about their plans in advance. In order not to cause unnecessary misunderstandings, it would be better to let Hagrid tell the story in person. Soon, the group arrived outside Hagrid's hut, and Hagrid opened the door for them. Good afternoon, Hagrid. What do you plan to teach in tomorrow's Care of Magical Creatures class? Hermione said generously. After the incident with Buckbeak, Hagrid would tell Harry and others in advance about the content of each of his Care of Magical Creatures classes, so that Harry and others could give him advice to prevent Hagrid from choosing some extremely dangerous magical animals and causing unnecessary harm. Hearing this, Hagrid shook his head and said, "Sorry, Hermione, I won't be teaching the Care of Magical Creatures class tomorrow. I think you will have a very good substitute professor tomorrow." Hearing Hagrid's words, except for Irina, Harry and the other two all showed incredible expressions. Harry said anxiously, "Why, Hagrid? Did those people in the Ministry of Magic still hold you responsible? But Professor Dumbledore has also vouched for you. You obviously have no problem. Besides, in our opinion, there is probably no better professor of magical creatures care than you." Hagrid explained to Harry, "It's like this. I was just suspended for inspection, and I will not be locked up in that damn place Azkaban. Moreover, I took the responsibility. Buckbeak will not be in danger. They have withdrawn the charges against Buckbeak." Listening to Hagrid's explanation, Harry and Ron still looked indignant. On the contrary, Hermione held her chin with her hand and lowered her head, as if thinking about something. "Did you do this, Irina?" Hermione quietly stepped back 2 steps. She looked at Hagrid, Harry and Ron who were arguing in front of her, and whispered in Irina's ear. Irina looked at Hermione in surprise. She didn't expect Hermione to guess it so quickly. Irina nodded, then shook her head, and said, "It was indeed me who asked Lin to help Buckbeak get rid of the crime, but don't worry, Hagrid will be suspended for inspection until the end of this school year at most. After all, Hagrid has done nothing wrong, and he will definitely be back next school year." Hermione looked at Hagrid worriedly and said, "That would be great. Buckbeak's charges have been dropped, and Hagrid is only suspended for half a school year. This may be the best result." At this time, Harry sat aside very unhappy and didn't say anything. Even though Hagrid explained to Harry that he voluntarily took on this responsibility, Harry still believed that Hagrid was innocent and should not pay for Malfoy's mistakes. "Hagrid, can you tell me who the substitute professor of our Care of Magical Creatures class is?" Irina asked curiously. Hearing this, Hagrid winked at her mysteriously and said, "You can see him tomorrow. I think it will be a surprise." Irina smiled. Since Hagrid said so, the substitute professor of the upcoming Care of Magical Creatures course must not be too bad, at least not much worse than the previous professor, Professor Kettleburn. Thinking of this, Irina also began to have some expectations for the substitute professor who will come tomorrow. She hoped that the substitute professor would raise many magical animals as companions like Mr. Newt Scamander, and had a talent for affinity with magical animals. She loved magical animals, and wanted to know more lovely magical animals. In this way, in the expectation of the upcoming substitute professor, a day passed quickly, and the first big class on the second afternoon was the Care of Magical Creatures class for Gryffindor's third-year wizards. Irina and her group arrived at the class venue more than 10 minutes in advance, waiting for the arrival of the substitute professor. As the class bell rang, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the venue. When Irina saw the figure of the substitute professor, a look of disbelief appeared on her face. "Why is it you, Mr. Scamander?" Irina said in surprise. Yes, the figure that appeared at the edge of the venue was Mr. Newt Scamander. Obviously, he was the substitute professor who took over the teaching of the Care of Magical Creatures class for half a school year, as Hagrid said. This is really a surprise. As the author of the textbook Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, there is probably no one more suitable than Newt Scamander to be the professor of the Care of Magical Creatures class. Newt smiled at her and said, "Why, are you not welcome?" Irina hurriedly stepped forward and carried his suitcase for him attentively. She answered without hesitation, "Welcome, of course. It is our honor that Mr. Scamander can come to our Care of Magical Creatures class." Seeing that Irina, their big sister, was so attentive to Newt, the little wizards of Gryffindor began to talk among themselves. "Is that old gentleman our substitute professor? He looks very capable. To be so respected by the big sister, the identity of that old man must be extraordinary. No way, didn't you read textbooks before? He is Mr. Newt Scamander, the author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them." What? Not long after, Newt's identity was revealed by the group of little wizards below, and these little wizards looked at him with admiration. Chapter 232. Every word is not mentioned. After learning that Mr. Newt Scamander, the author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and the master of magical creatures, would temporarily take over their magical creature care classes, almost all the young wizards were looking forward to their next classes. Looking at the young wizards who were whispering and constantly peeking at him, Newt did not interrupt them, but waited until they gradually quieted down before speaking with a smile. "I'm very happy to be your substitute professor for the elective course of magical creature care. My name is Newt Scamander. I'm sure many of you are familiar with me," Newt said to everyone with a smile. Looking at these young faces, Newt felt as if he had become young again. At this time, whether it was the little lions of Gryffindor or the little snakes of Slytherin, they fully showed due respect to this respectable old man. They listened to Newt's speech patiently and applauded at the right time. Perhaps to take care of the feelings of the little wizards, or perhaps to emulate Dumbledore, Newt did not say too much empty words, but quickly got to the point. "I think you are all guessing what magical creatures we will see in this class," Newt said mysteriously. Hearing Newt's words, a Gryffindor lion below asked with an expectant expression, "Professor Scamander, what we are going to see today must be very ferocious magical creatures, like the hippogriff." Although a little wizard was injured in Hagrid's first class, the Gryffindor lions knew that it was Malfoy who was being mean and insulting Buckbeak. In the eyes of the adventure-loving lions, Hagrid's first magical creature protection class was probably the most interesting one so far. Newt smiled at the little lion and said, "I don't deny that ferocious magical animals can bring everyone a good visual experience, but I think it's too early for the third-year wizards. Of course, this is not because they are so dangerous, but because not every third-year wizard can control his behavior well, right?" Hearing Newt's words, the little lions of Gryffindor naturally thought of Malfoy's matter, and they all laughed. Even most of the little snakes in Slytherin could not refute Newt's remarks. Looking at Malfoy, whose face was pale and blue not far away, Harry and Ron couldn't help but smile, and they looked at Newt with a little more kindness. "Mr. Scamander, that means you will show those ferocious animals in the senior class, right?" Hermione asked curiously. Newt smiled and nodded. "Yes, the older wizards are always more stable. I think they have enough self-control and will not provoke the magical animals that can kill them." As Newt's voice fell, everyone laughed again. Obviously, although Newt did not mention the fact that Malfoy provoked Buckbeak and was injured, he did not leave this matter. Just like Harry, Newt is also a very good friend of Hagrid, and now that his friend has been wronged, Newt will naturally not sit idly by. Even clay people have 3 points of anger, let alone Newt, who is a well-known master of magical animals? Exclamation mark. It is true that as a good man, he cannot use a harsh tone to target a student like Professor Snape, but in the process of stating the matter, if he appropriately mentions that matter, the young wizard's self-improvement can achieve his goal. After mocking Malfoy implicitly, Newt no longer focused on personal matters, but started his teaching seriously. Newt opened the suitcase that Irina had placed on the stone bench. He whistled, and a fat, downy bat jumped out of the suitcase. It seemed that it could not fly at all. It would rather jump slowly and clumsily from the suitcase to Newt than flap its wings. This is the magical animal we are going to see today. Its name is the bullbird. Can anyone tell me what kind of magical animal the bullbird is? Newt reached out and picked up the bullbird. He smiled and looked at everyone. As a top student, Hermione took a step forward without hesitation. She said confidently, "Mr. Scamander, the dark bird is native to Mauritius. It is a fat, fluffy bat that cannot fly. It is famous for its extraordinary means of escaping danger. It can disappear without a trace without any effort, and then pop up from another place." Newt smiled and nodded, saying, "Very good. These are what I recorded in Fantastic Beasts, and where to find them. It can be seen that you have a deep understanding of the knowledge in the book. Can you tell me your name?" Hearing Newt's praise, Hermione couldn't help but smile. "Hermione Granger. Sir, I have self-studied every chapter of your Fantastic Beasts and where to find them 3 times, and I have memorized them all." Newt looked at Hermione in surprise. He didn't expect Hermione to have memorized everything in his book. You know, even many famous magical zoologists today may not be able to tell the characteristics of all the magical animals recorded in Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. Okay, Miss Granger. For your accurate answer to the characteristics of the bull escape bird, Gryffindor will give you 5 points, Newt said, and he looked around at everyone again. Also, does anyone want to add something? It's not limited to the content in the textbook. Irina thought for a moment and said, "Mr. Scamander, it is said that our wizard's apparition spell was invented based on the special ability of the bull escape bird to disappear from one place and appear in another place. Does this count?" Newt nodded with a smile and said, "Yes, of course it counts. Gryffindor will give you another 5 points." After Irina, some young wizards who knew something about the magical animal, the bull escape bird, also raised their hands to add some content, but because most of the knowledge points about the bull escape bird had been recorded in the book Fantastic Beasts and where to find them, Hermione answered them. And the more important knowledge point of the relationship between the bull escape bird and the apparition spell had already been answered by Irina, so even if they could add content, most of it was irrelevant. However, in order not to undermine the self-confidence of the young wizards, Newt still added 1 to 3 school points for each young wizard who added new content. Thanks to the book friend Crab for the 1766 reading coins reward. Thank you. Thank you. Chapter 233. False Dementors and True Patronuses. After the last Slytherin snake who added the content got Newt's extra points, Newt put down the bullbird in his hand and planned to let it show its ability. The bullbird disappeared from the spot with a bang, and when the little wizards kept looking for it, the bullbird had already appeared on the head of one of the little wizards. Unfortunately, the little wizard whose hair was mistaken for a bird's nest by the bullbird was Malfoy. Although the bullbird was fat and covered with fluff, perhaps because of their special abilities, their weight was not very heavy. Therefore, when the bullbird appeared on Malfoy's head, Malfoy was not able to notice the sudden addition of a bird on his head at the first time. Not long after, a sharp-eyed Slytherin snake discovered the bullbird on Malfoy's head, and he pointed at Malfoy's head and exclaimed. This exclamation attracted the attention of most of the young wizards, and after looking in the direction of the little snake's hand, these young wizards also found the bull escape bird on Malfoy's head, which made them laugh. Feeling the gazes of the crowd, Malfoy realized that a bull escape bird suddenly appeared on his head. Damn beast. Malfoy was angry and wanted to grab the bull escape bird on his head, but he missed. Before his hands touched the fluff of the bull escape bird, the bull escape bird disappeared again with a bang and appeared in Irina's palm the next moment. Feeling the warmth in her hand, Irina rubbed the head of the bull escape bird in her hand with surprise. She remembered that, when she was taking care of the magical animals in Newt's suitcase during the summer vacation, the bull escape bird had flashed to her shoulder several times and accepted her touch. In this way, she and the bull escape bird were old acquaintances. After Irina put the bull escape bird back on the ground, the bull escape bird showed its skills to the young wizard several times in succession. It kept disappearing and reappearing in various places, which made the young wizards amazed again and again. Soon, this interesting magical creature care class ended. Except for Malfoy, every young wizard felt a little reluctant when leaving the venue. They wished that the next magical creature care class would come immediately. After watching the young wizards leave, Newt breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Irina, who was left alone, and asked nervously, "How was it? Did I do well in this class?" Looking at Newt, who had regained his social phobia in front of her, Irina smiled kindly and whispered, "It was very good, Mr. Scamander." "That's good," Newt said, patting his chest. Even though Newt was already a well-known magical beast master in the magic world, it was the first time for him to appear in front of the young wizards as a professor. Just like Hagrid at the beginning of the school year, Newt was also worried that he would mess up the first class in his life as a professor. But it turned out that he did very well. Newt looked around, and after making sure that there was no one else here except himself and Irina, he seemed to relax a lot. He looked at the little witch next to him and said, "Irina, how is the little curled-winged devil recently?" Irina said, "Thanks to you, the little curled-winged devil is living very well. It seems to have gained some weight recently. How about you come to my suitcase to visit it on the weekend?" Newt readily agreed. "Okay." In the next few magical beast protection classes, Newt showed everyone safe and harmless magical beasts such as the Niffler, the Botrickle and the Moon Beast, which made all the young wizards, except Malfoy, feel particularly satisfied with Newt's magical beast protection class. As time goes by, a new Quidditch event is coming. This time, the Gryffindor Quidditch team, where Harry is, will play against the Ravenclaw Quidditch team. Professor McGonagall, who had thoroughly tested the firebolt for possible curses, had already returned the firebolt to Harry some time ago. Therefore, Harry, who took the firebolt to the Quidditch field, could be said to have upgraded his muskets to cannons. For Harry, who had lost his Nimbus 2000, the sweeping series of flying brooms provided by the school were no different from the tattered brooms used to sweep the floor. Only a flying broom with extremely high performance, such as the firebolt, could allow him to regain the feeling of galloping in the sky. Before the game started, Irina, who had not yet entered the audience seats, saw Malfoy, Goyle and Crabbe wearing black robes that looked like Dementors. They buried their whole bodies in the black robes, as if they were secretly planning something. Irina, who had read the original book, naturally knew what the Malfoy trio wanted to do, but she did not stop the actions of the three men, but instead raised the corners of her mouth slightly. "You little brat, you still want to pretend to be a Dementor to scare Harry. You probably don't know who taught Harry the Dementor." Under Lin's teaching, Harry's Patronus charm was not bad, and Professor Lupin gave him some special training and used the Dementor transformed from a boggart as a practice object. Now Harry's attainments in the Patronus charm can be said to be higher than the original. As expected, when Harry rode the firebolt at high speed and tried to catch the golden snitch that flashed by, facing the Malfoy trio who suddenly appeared pretending to be Dementors, Harry's face did not show even a trace of fear. Harry pulled out his wand from his waist with a calm expression, and without hesitation, he pointed it in the direction of the Malfoy trio and chanted the spell, Expecto Patronus. A group of silver white light that almost condensed into the shape of a stag rushed towards the direction of the Malfoy trio. This silver white light, which already had a certain impact, actually knocked the Malfoy trio out directly, and they stumbled and rolled down the stands. After casting the Patronus charm, Harry did not pay attention to whether his spell was effective. He reached forward and managed to catch the golden snitch firmly in his hand before the seeker of the Ravenclaw Quidditch team, Cho-Chang. With the whistle, the Gryffindor Quidditch team was declared the winner. Wood and other players came to hug Harry with cheers, and Professor Lupin also came near them. Very good Patronus charm, just a little bit, it can condense into a complete form. Professor Lupin praised. Chapter 234. Of course it is to help you get rid of the crime, Mr. Blake. Harry turned to look at Professor Lupin, his face full of excitement. The Dementors didn't affect me at all. I didn't feel anything. That's because they aren't Dementors. Professor Lupin seemed to be trying hard to hold back his laughter. Come and see. Professor Lupin led Harry out of the crowd and came to a place where they could see the edge of the court. Professor Lupin pointed to 3 figures struggling in black robes not far away, chuckled and said, "You scared Mr. Malfoy so much." Hearing this, Harry's eyes widened in surprise. The Malfoy trio and Marcus Flint, the captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team, who were falling on the court, were struggling to get out of their long, hooded black robes. At this time, Professor McGonagall stood beside them, with an angry look on her face. Professor McGonagall shouted angrily, "What a shameful trick. Despicable and cowardly, trying to play a trick on Gryffindor's Seeker. I'll give each of you detention, and 50 points will be deducted from Slytherin. I'm going to talk to Professor Dumbledore about this, that's for sure. Ah, here he comes." Even Professor McGonagall, who was always fair and never had personal opinions about students, was so angry, which showed how infuriating the behavior of the Malfoy trio was. Professor McGonagall looked at Professor Dumbledore, who was walking towards her, and she angrily told Professor Dumbledore what Malfoy had just done. After the Gryffindor Quidditch team won the game, the Gryffindor Lions celebrated the victory of the game in the common room with a whole day of partying, as if they had won the Quidditch Cup. The carnival lasted until late at night. Fred and George even used the second homemade Marauders map they got from Lin to sneak into Hogsmeade and buy a lot of butterbeer, pumpkin soda and several bags of Honeydukes candy. To be honest, Fred and George were shocked when they learned that the password of this Marauders map was Voldemort is a boiled egg with a 2-hole electrical socket. But their expressions soon changed from surprise to amazement. They marveled at how bold the password of this Marauders map was, and at the same time, they lamented how cleverly the password was set. No minions of Voldemort's forces dared to say this password. Unlike other wizards, the Weirlight Winds who dared to put you-know-who and Constipation Wren together in the original book naturally would not be afraid to say this password. This is also the reason why Lin directly gave the homemade Marauders map to the Weirlight Twins instead of remaking a Marauders map that was exactly the same as the original, including the opening remarks and the password. After seeing George throwing a bunch of mint toad candies to the little lions, Angelina, who is also a member of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, asked curiously, "How did you get these things?" "Hey, with the help of the moon, with a little help from the legendary Fire Devil," Fred said with a smile. Originally, Fred wanted to say Moonface, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs, but when he was about to say it, he suddenly remembered that the Marauders map in his hand was no longer the original Marauders map, but the Marauders map made by Lin. Therefore, Fred temporarily changed the name. Considering Lin's special attainments in fire magic and his love of exaggeration, he took the title of Fire Devil without Lin knowing. Of course, even if Lin knew that the Weirlight Winds secretly nicknamed him, he would probably just laugh it off. While everyone was reveling, Irina quietly slipped out of the Gryffindor common room. Hermione glanced at Irina, who was leaving, and didn't say much. She probably thought Irina was just going out for some fresh air. At this time, Irina didn't wander around in the corridor, but walked out of Hogwarts Castle and came to the Homping Willow. Irina waved her wand, and a stone flew up under the effect of the levitation spell and hit the scar under the Homping Willow. The Homping Willow stopped moving, and Irina went into the secret passage and followed it to the Shrieking Shack. On the sofa in the Shrieking Shack, Irina saw Sirius Black, who had been waiting for a long time. "Irina, are you going to attack Peter Pettigrew today?" Sirius asked. As early as this morning before the Quidditch game started, Irina wrote a letter, hoping that Sirius would be ready in the evening and wait for her arrival. Irina shook her head and said, "No, we need you to go to Hogwarts Castle today and act out a play." Hearing this, Sirius couldn't help but frown. "Acting?" Irina nodded affirmatively and said, "Yes, acting. We need you to sneak into the Gryffindor dormitory, go to Ron, you know, Harry's best friend, go to his bed, pull open his curtains, pretend to want to kill him, and then escape before he wakes up and reacts." Sirius' face was full of question marks, wondering, "Why do you want to do this? You want me to do this? It shouldn't be just to scare your friend, right?" Irina chuckled and said, the alchemical cage, where Peter Pettigrew is located, is inside Ron's curtains. Maybe Ron will misunderstand that you are here to kill him for a while, but when everything becomes clear later, he will understand that you want to kill Peter Pettigrew, not Ron Weasley. And I want you to do this to increase people's attention to this matter. Only when people's attention is focused on you, Sirius Black, when the matter of Peter Pettigrew is exposed, people will pay more attention to you, the hero who has been wronged for more than 10 years, and pay attention to every move of the Ministry of Magic. Irina said so. However, after hearing that Peter Pettigrew was in Ron's curtain, Sirius's attention was firmly attracted. He said loudly, then why don't you let me kill Peter Pettigrew tonight? Since you let me take the knife and appear in front of him, what reason do I have not to kill this damn traitor? Just based on Harry, Mr. Black. Irina said calmly. Sirius was stunned and said, Harry? Irina said lightly, don't forget, Harry has never seen his parents since he became conscious, and you, Mr. Black, Harry's godfather, are his only remaining relative in this world. Would you rather let Peter Pettigrew die as a hero, while you live forever as a criminal? Harry doesn't even know that he has a godfather like you. Sirius was silent for a long time, and then he asked in a hoarse voice, so, your purposes? Irina whispered, of course it is to help you get rid of the crime, Mr. Black. Otherwise, Lin and I could have killed Peter Pettigrew long ago, right? We had so many opportunities to kill him. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 235. Perhaps it was to make up for the regret. Hearing Irina's words, Sirius fell silent again. Why? I mean, why do you want to help me so much? We have only met twice in total. Even when you knew that Peter Pettigrew was the rat in the Weasley family and planned everything, we had never met before. Sirius asked in a low voice. Irina held her chin with her hand, thinking, and said softly, why? If you want to give reasons, there are many, such as I'm Harry's friend, and you are Harry's godfather, or you are Lin's father's comrade in arms and his uncle. But if you really want to give a sincere reason, maybe it's to make up for the regret. Irina smiled and said, since she and Lin have traveled to this familiar yet strange world, those words that were once written in the book have become reality and presented to them, then everything they have done and changed may be to make up for a regret. Make up for the regret in their hearts. Make up for regrets. Well, you convinced me. Sirius savored Irina's words carefully and said with a smile. Irina handed a piece of parchment to Sirius, saying, it records the password of the Gryffindor common room, as well as Harry's dormitory room number and Ron's bed number. Be careful not to hurt others by mistake. Sirius took the parchment and nodded. I understand. After handing the parchment to Sirius, Irina followed the secret passage back to the bottom of the Homping Willow, and when she came out of the secret passage in trance, a figure was already waiting for her here. Is everything done? Lin stretched out his hand and pulled Irina out of the narrow secret passage in trance, and he asked. Irina nodded vigorously, gave him a thumbs up, and said, it's all done. He will leave from the Shrieking Shack in about 10 minutes. Lin nodded slightly and said, okay, you go back first, and leave the rest to me. Okay, be safe. Irina was not polite either. After she told Lin, she quickly cast a layer of disillusionment on herself, and rushed towards the direction of Hogwarts Castle. After watching Irina leave, Lin also cast a disillusionment on himself, but he did not leave, but waited quietly in the same place. 10 minutes later, Lin saw Sirius coming out of the entrance of the secret passage. Sirius was holding a sharp knife in his hand and heading towards the direction of Hogwarts Castle. Sirius kept recalling the main content of this operation. He did not notice that the secret passage behind him, which was about to be closed, was opened again and then closed automatically. After Sirius left, Lin quickly entered the secret passage and arrived at the Shrieking Shack. The Shrieking Shack was where Sirius finally revealed his identity to Harry and confronted Peter Pettigrew, who had turned back into a human form. In order to ensure that the final plan went smoothly, Lin planned to take advantage of Sirius's absence to bury some alchemical arrays for the Shrieking Shack and cast some special magic. Lin's eyes were cast on an abandoned training dummy in the Shrieking Shack. The left arm of the training dummy had disappeared, and its body was also full of pits. Obviously, this training dummy was a teaching tool used by a former defense against the dark arts professor. Later, because the training dummy was too damaged and could not bear the magic with greater lethality, it was abandoned here. Lin gently waved his wand, and obscure syllables came out of his mouth. After a while, a ball of grey special magic from hell appeared at the top of his wand. Lin pushed his wand forward, and the ball of grey magic flew forward and sank into the body of the abandoned training dummy. Suddenly, a faint blue will-o'-the-wisp ignited in the eye sockets of the training dummy, and it stood up from its original position and saluted to Lin En with its only remaining right arm. You return to your original position and disguise yourself. Do not act without my order. Lin En gave the training dummy an order indifferently. As Lin En's voice fell, the training dummy executed Lin En's order without hesitation. It fell back to its original position, and even the two faint blue will-o'-the-wisp ignited in its eye sockets gradually extinguished. Perhaps only the faint fluctuations of magic power in the training dummy's body could make Lin En sure that the training dummy still had a soul and was not dead. After giving the training dummy a soul, Lin En waved his magic wand again, and golden threads intertwined in front of him. Long before coming to the Screaming Shack, Lin En replaced the Devil's Authority with a new concentrated magic crystal. Now the magic power he can mobilize is enough for him to set up the desired alchemy array in the Screaming Shack. I saw that some offensive and some defensive alchemy arrays were made on the ground of the Shrieking Shack, and some golden threads of amplification alchemy arrays that complemented the previous alchemy arrays were engraved on the ceiling. Lin chanted obscure spells, and as his wand was waved, a golden light flashed, and the alchemy arrays in the Shrieking Shack sank into the ground, ceiling or wall. After doing all this, Lin looked around the Shrieking Shack, and after making sure that there was no place missed, he returned to the outside of Hogwarts Castle through the secret passage. Just as it should have happened, Sirius broke into Harry's bedroom with a knife, and tore open Ron's curtains, which frightened Ron, and made him scream. However, Sirius, who should have escaped at the first moment, stared at Peter Pettigrew, who was locked in the alchemy cage on Ron's bed. The knife in his hand was raised and lowered, as if he was struggling whether to take this good opportunity to kill Peter Pettigrew, the damn traitor. Fortunately, Sirius's reason took over. He remembered what Irina said to him in the Shrieking Shack. He put away the knife in his hand and left the dormitory quickly. Sirius escaped from Hogwarts Castle in a narrow way. He was almost caught by the professors because he was in a daze in front of Ron's bed for a few seconds. After Sirius broke into Hogwarts Castle again, not only Hogwarts Castle, but the entire British wizarding world was shocked. The wizards in the British wizarding world could not imagine that Hogwarts Castle, where Dumbledore, the greatest white wizard of this century, was in charge, would be broken into one after another by the criminal Sirius Black, and even almost threatened the lives of students. This made the wizards turn their attention to Sirius Black and focus on the case that happened more than 10 years ago. Chapter 236 What does the life and death of the people have to do with me, Cornelius Fudge! Exclamation mark. Not only that, after Sirius Black broke into Hogwarts Castle, a rumor suddenly spread among the people, that is, Peter Pettigrew was not dead, and Sirius Black was the real hero. Although this so-called rumor was so absurd in the eyes of wizards, this rumor that suddenly spread among people made many people doubt the truth of the case that year. What the wizards questioned and criticized was that Sirius Black was sent to Azkaban prison without a formal trial. This procedural loophole made wizards doubt whether the so-called truth of the year was true. If the spread of this rumor only caused the wizards to doubt, then an article written by anonymous in Xenophilius Lovegoods the Quibbler entitled The Ministry of Magic, which breeds darkness, can't distinguish between heroes and criminals detonated the emotions of wizards. This article, titled The Ministry of Magic, which breeds darkness, can't even distinguish between heroes and criminals, uses extreme conspiracy theories to believe that Peter Pettigrew was the criminal of the year and put the blame on the innocent Sirius Black. The article is full of distorted facts and exaggerated words, which makes many readers subconsciously think that this article was written by Rita Skeeter. However, this seemingly absurd and imprecise article inserts many truths of the events of the year in many unnoticed places. For example, Peter Pettigrew was not blown to the point of only having one finger left, but escaped with one finger. For example, at the suggestion of Sirius Black, The Potter family temporarily replaced the keeper of the Fidelius charm with Peter Pettigrew, and Sirius Black took the initiative to plead guilty after the incident because of self-blame, and was sent to Azkaban prison. However, even if these things are true, under the cover of the absurd statements throughout the article, this absurd statement will naturally not be recognized by people. Rather than saying that the emotions of the wizards were triggered by the content of the article, it is better to say that the conspiracy theory made the wizards more dissatisfied with the Ministry of Magic's lack of attention to procedures when enforcing the law, and the fact that wizards were thrown into a hellhole like Azkaban prison without trial. Many wizards appealed to the Ministry of Magic to re-examine the case of Sirius Black, which made the officials of the Ministry of Magic very anxious. Retrial? Exclamation mark. Sirius Black has not been caught yet, and they are re-examining with a hammer? Exclamation mark. Not only these officials of the Ministry of Magic, but even the Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge, could not sit still. If this matter could not be properly resolved, I'm afraid that his reputation would be greatly reduced. Even after he abdicated, he would be dubbed the most unpopular Minister of Magic. Thinking of this, Fudge could not stay quietly in his office. During these days, Fudge took his subordinates to Hogwarts Castle several times to meet Dumbledore, asking to allow Dementors to enter Hogwarts again so as to search for the criminal Sirius Black more quickly. But there is no doubt that his request was rejected by Dumbledore. Those damn Dementors invaded the Quidditch field of Hogwarts a few months ago and almost killed the students. How could Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, tolerate these damn things to enter the territory of Hogwarts again? Exclamation mark. Fudge and Dumbledore negotiated to no avail, and finally the two sides parted unhappily. However, even if Fudge could not send Dementors to Hogwarts, it would be no problem to let them station in Hogsmeade Village and patrol the area around Hogwarts. It was just that after the large number of Dementors settled in, the residents of Hogsmeade Village complained constantly. But Fudge didn't care about this, as long as he made the majority of the people realize that he cared about the capture of Sirius Black, and made the majority of the people no longer dissatisfied with him. That was enough. As for the daily life of the hundreds of villagers in Hogsmeade, what did that have to do with Cornelius Fudge? Exclamation mark. After the Dementors settled in Hogsmeade, the little wizards in Hogwarts Castle were reluctant to go to Hogsmeade on weekends. After all, they really didn't want to deal with those ghosts. Even if some little wizards really needed to go to the shops in Hogsmeade to buy things, they would leave as soon as they bought things, and were unwilling to stay in Hogsmeade for a long time. This greatly reduced the bar business in Hogsmeade, especially the Three Broomsticks and Madame Puddifoot's tea house. Compared with the usual business, it can be said that only 1% of it survived. The Three Broomsticks at least had the local residents of Hogsmeade to take care of the business, but Madame Puddifoot's tea house, whose target audience was young couples from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, was on the verge of bankruptcy. After all, no one would want to date a couple in a place where Dementors were rampant. They would rather sneak around at night and have a tryst in the Forbidden Forest outside Hogwarts Castle than go to Hogsmeade Village openly. While all kinds of changes were happening outside, Hogwarts Castle was still quiet. Even though Sirius Black had just broken into Hogwarts Castle, the worried little wizards gradually calmed down under the professor's increasing patrols. On this day, in the field of the care of magical creatures class outside Hogwarts Castle, Newt was introducing magical animals called invisible beasts to the third-year Gryffindor and Slytherin little wizards. During this period of study, the dangerous level classification of magical animals taught by Newt in the Ministry of Magic has gradually increased from dangerous level 20th and dangerous level 30 magical animals to dangerous level XXXX magical animals. Of course, even if Newt showed the magical animals of dangerous level XXXX to the young wizards, most of these magical animals were relatively docile and peaceful magical animals of the same dangerous level. Invisible Beast is one of them. Invisible Beast is a gentle, quiet herbivorous animal. Its appearance looks a bit like an elegant ape man. Its big black eyes are often hidden in its hair, revealing a hint of sadness. The whole body of Invisible Beast is covered with long fine hair that shines like silk. The fur of Invisible Beast is very valuable because its hair can be used to weave invisibility cloaks. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237. Newt, would you like to be my student? After learning that the fur of the invisible beast is the raw material for making the invisibility cloak, several Slytherin snakes looked at the invisible beast with strange eyes, but with Newt present, they did not dare to do anything inappropriate. The invisible beast showed its invisible ability in front of everyone, making everyone exclaim. Soon, a magical creature care class ended. Newt watched the little wizards leave with a smile, but only Irina was left. After helping Newt put the invisible beast into the suitcase, Irina looked at Newt and asked curiously, "Mr. Scamander, what do you want me to stay for?" Newt closed the suitcase, stood up straight, and his face became serious. "Irina, during this period of observation, I found that both your love for magical animals and your talent in magical zoology are impeccable. Therefore, I would like to ask you a question solemnly." Hearing this, Irina restrained the smile that had always been on her face, and she said solemnly, "You say?" Newt said solemnly, "Irina, are you willing to be my student? Not the relationship between professor and student in Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, but the kind of student who inherits my lifelong learning and walks in the world as my heir." Hearing Newt's words, Irina was refreshed. Without any hesitation, she bowed deeply to Newt and said, "Of course, Mr. Scamander, oh no, my teacher. It is Irina's honor to be your student." As early as the summer vacation, when Irina rented Newt's suitcase, took care of those magical animals with Newt, and learned a lot of knowledge about magical animals under Newt's teaching, Irina had the idea of worshipping Newt as her teacher. After all, although Irina and Newt were not in name, they were already in fact. During the summer vacation, Newt was always fulfilling the duties of a master. And now, Newt took the initiative to ask to accept her as his student. What reason does Irina have to disagree? Exclamation mark. "Okay, Irina, I remember you should have no classes this afternoon, right? Come to my office at that time. I plan to take you to meet my partners again, as my student," Newt said very happily. As early as August, Irina and Hagrid visited him together. After showing her unparalleled affinity for magical animals in her suitcase, Newt had the intention of accepting this smart and clever little witch as his student. However, after experiencing the things during Grindelwald's time, Newt did not make a hasty decision. Instead, after observing her for so long, he carefully decided to accept her as a student. "Okay, teacher." Irina nodded vigorously. Time soon came to the afternoon, and Irina knocked on the door of Newt's office as promised. After Newt opened the door of the office, Irina saw the open suitcase lying flat on the desk. Just like repeated countless times before, Irina followed Newt into the suitcase, and a vast world inside appeared in front of her. Unlike Irina's suitcase world, which only had 4 repaired areas, most areas in Newt's suitcase world were properly placed with different magical animals. In the magical animal protection class before, Newt took out the bull bird, the niffler, the botricle, the moon beast and the invisible beast, which were all brought out from this small world. Newt came to the suitcase world, as if he had returned home, and his expression seemed much more relaxed. However, his tone was still as solemn as before. "Irina, I can't protect them forever. Perhaps, in the future, you will need to take over my duties and become their closest partner to protect them." Although Newt, who was infinitely close to the Demon King level wizard, still had a very long life, his tone of telling the last things made Irina's mood become depressed. "Teacher, Irina didn't know what to say. Her lips opened slightly, but then closed again. Newt raised his hand to interrupt Irina's intention to speak again, and said, "I can foresee that the magic world in the future will not be too peaceful, Irina, even if I'm still here. But when you need them more than me, I think they will be more willing to stay by your side." Irina was stunned, and she probably understood what Newt meant. "Thank you, teacher," Irina whispered. Irina's attention was all on what Newt said, that when she needed these magical animals more, Newt would let these magical animals serve as a force for Irina to protect herself. She did not notice that what Newt said was the future of the magic world will not be peaceful instead of the future of the British magic world will not be peaceful. Although it was just a slight difference in words, the scope of what they represent was very different. Irina spent an afternoon following Newt to visit the magical animals in the entire suitcase world, but unlike the playful attitude during the summer vacation, she seemed much more serious this time. After learning that Irina was the heir chosen by Newt, the magical animals who were originally very close to Irina were now even more enthusiastic about her than Newt. Especially the Zawu. Almost the whole body was glued to Irina until Irina followed Newt to walk through the entire suitcase world and was about to leave the suitcase. It reluctantly returned to its living area. After returning to the office, Newt closed the suitcase and put it away and then sat down on the office chair. Irina did not leave. She waited patiently for Newt to finish this series of actions. She could guess that Newt must have something else to tell her. Sure enough, after Newt finished his work, he looked at Irina and said with a smile, "Irina, after you finish the dinner, can you come over again?" Irina understood that Newt still had something to teach her, so she quickly agreed, "No problem, teacher." At this time, the sky was gradually getting dark. If Irina didn't hurry up, she might not even be able to catch up with the dinner today. After leaving Newt's office, she almost ran down the stairs and entered the auditorium. Fortunately, Irina arrived in time. When Irina arrived at the auditorium, the dinner had just started, so Irina didn't have to eat only a little dessert. Chapter 238 Powerful Traceless Stretching Spell. After the dinner, Irina didn't even go back to the Gryffindor common room, but went directly to Newt's office. After Newt used the levitation spell to open the door of the office and let Irina in, Irina saw Newt sitting behind his desk enjoying the delicious food. Seeing this scene, Irina's expression suddenly became resentful. She pouted and said, "Teacher, can you bear to use your professor's privilege to let the house elves deliver food and then let your dear students run down to grab food?" At this time, Newt had just finished dinner. He elegantly took the napkin to wipe his mouth and then smiled and said, "Exercise more is good for your health. As for me, I'm already an old man and I can't climb the treacherous and changeable stairs of Hogwarts Castle." Irina ignored Newt's excuses and continued to stare at Newt. Looking at Irina's resentful eyes staring at him, Newt quickly gave up and said helplessly, okay, after we finish class tonight, I will treat you to a midnight snack. How about it?" Hearing this, Irina's face was immediately filled with a smile. Seeing this scene, Newt subconsciously wiped the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead. This child is quite easy to coax. "Okay, let's get down to business." Newt said so. He waved his wand, and the plates and cutlery on the desk disappeared. Irina hurriedly sat up straight and looked at Newt with burning eyes. I only heard Newt say lightly, "In the field other than magical animals, I also have a certain attainment, and what I plan to teach you today is the powerful traceless stretching spell that I'm quite proficient in." As Newt's voice fell, Irina's eyes lit up directly. When it comes to Newt's traceless stretching spell, it can be said that no one can match him. Although Irina has learned the traceless extension charm, her traceless extension charm can only expand the interior space of a car to the size of a small room at most, which is not comparable to Newt's powerful traceless extension charm that can expand the space of a suitcase into a small world. The difference between the two is like that between an ant and an elephant, which is insurmountable. You know, this suitcase is the product of my traceless extension charm. Even the vast space inside, which is like a small world, was created under the influence of the powerful traceless extension charm. Newt said lightly. Irina nodded vigorously, and she said in a longing tone, "Yes, teacher. I can hardly imagine what kind of powerful traceless extension spell can expand the volume of a suitcase into such a large small world, and it can also be maintained stably without collapsing." Newt chuckled and said, "The powerful traceless extension spell alone is certainly not enough to maintain the existence of such a huge small world. There is also the power of alchemy inside this small world. In this regard, I think your friend knows better than me." Irina naturally understood that Newt was talking about Lin, and she nodded slightly to show her agreement. The creation of the small world inside the suitcase involves the combination of traceless extension spell and alchemy. I also asked for the help of the great alchemist Nicholas Flamel. Of course, these are all off topic. What we are going to learn today is still based on my powerful traceless extension spell. Newt said so. So, in the next few hours, Newt carefully taught Irina the theoretical knowledge and casting skills of the powerful traceless extension spell. Of course, nothing can be accomplished overnight, and Irina could not raise her attainments in the traceless stretch spell to Newt's level in just one night. At the end of this class, Newt made a list of about 7 or 8 books related to the traceless stretch spell for Irina, and gave her his notes on practicing the traceless stretch spell. Most of the books on this list of books related to the traceless stretch spell were in the forbidden section of the library, but Newt, as a professor, handed over the list of books and gave Irina more than a dozen blank book signing slips with blank book titles. This made Irina want to cry but not cry. Sure enough, is she going to follow Lin's old path? Exclamation mark. After this night, Newt never came to her alone for the next few days, and Irina naturally did not slack off during these days. She was a top student and finished reading the books on the list in just 3 days. Of course, the books on the stretch spell and this list are just appetizers. The knowledge points in Newt's magic notebook are what Irina really studies. Irina has devoted almost all of her spare time to the study of the stretch spell, and her level of the stretch spell has improved rapidly with the passage of time. In just 1 week, Irina has been able to expand the space in a suitcase to the size of a villa. Even though there is still a huge gap compared to Newt's stretch spell, her level of the stretch spell is probably ranked in the top 5 even in the entire British magic world. While Irina was carefully studying the stretch spell, Lin's understanding of the special magic from hell was greatly improved. In the nights of this week, Lin would cast a layer of disembodiment on himself every day, sneak into the forbidden forest and use the 8-eyed giant spider to test the special magic from hell that he summoned. Although it is not a good thing to test magic with magical animals, if this magical animal is an invasive species of the forbidden forest, then Lin En will not have any psychological burden. Lin En tried to throw the grey magic ball into the body of the 8-eyed giant spider, and when the grey magic ball merged into the body of the 8-eyed giant spider, Lin En was surprised to find that there was an 8-eyed giant spider's perspective in his mind. He can observe the world through the perspective of the 8-eyed giant spider that has merged with the grey magic, and even forcibly control the body of the 8-eyed giant spider and make the 8-eyed giant spider do any action, just like the Imperious Curse. After repeated experiments many times, Lin En determined the effect of this special magic from hell after it was integrated into the life form. Lin En injected that special magic from hell into the body of the life form, which is equivalent to the effect of the Imperious Curse on the life form, and Lin En's control over the life form depends on the strength of the willpower of the life form, which is not much different from the Imperious Curse. The real special thing about this effect is that Lin En can unconditionally obtain the opponent's vision and observe the world from the opponent's perspective. This ability is not affected by the opponent's strength. Of course, this does not mean that this ability is unsolvable. A powerful wizard can use his own magic power to expel the magic power from hell from the body and get out of Lin En's control. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 239 Soul Curse. After repeating the experiment and finding out the effect of this special magic from hell when used alone, Lin En named this magic separated from the purgatory demon golem, Soul Charm. This spell can give souls to non-living things and can also attach to living things, control the actions of living things, and obtain their vision. The name of Soul Charm is very suitable for this spell. Ancient magic is really a treasure. The ancient magic of purgatory demon golem alone can simplify and separate the 3 modern magics of fire charm, hell flame refining and soul charm. This is just a simple castration of some of its abilities. If I can master the underlying logic of purgatory demon golem, I'm afraid that creating modern magic will be easy for me. Lin En put away his wand and couldn't help saying. After creating the soul charm, Lin En seemed to think of something. He cast a layer of disillusionment on himself and headed towards the direction of the Gryffindor common room. In Lin's repeated experiments, if Lin only obtained the other party's vision after casting the soul charm on the living being without forcibly controlling the other party's behavior, then the other party would never realize that he was cursed. In other words, Lin can cast the soul charm on Peter Pettigrew and obtain Peter Pettigrew's vision. As long as Lin does not control Peter Pettigrew's actions, even if their plan is flawed, and Peter Pettigrew escapes, Lin can obtain his vision through the soul charm inserted in Peter Pettigrew, and thus track Peter Pettigrew's location. At this time, Lin has arrived outside the Gryffindor common room. The door of the Gryffindor common room at night seems very quiet, and because Sir Cadogan was dismissed after putting Sirius in the Gryffindor common room, the fat lady who returned to the Gryffindor common room to guard the door had already fallen asleep. Looking at the closed door, Lin did not try to break in by force, but left the monitoring magic in the original place and returned to the Slytherin common room. This monitoring magic can sense the alchemical cage that Lin had made before. That is, if Ron leaves the Gryffindor common room with Scabbers in the alchemical cage, then the monitoring magic will certainly be able to feed back to Lin. And if Peter Pettigrew did not leave, then Lin could safely find an opportunity to sneak into the Gryffindor dormitory during the day and cast the soul charm on Peter Pettigrew in the alchemical cage. The next day was the weekend, and the Dementors' entry into Hogsmeade caused the little wizards to change their weekend time from going to Hogsmeade to hanging around the Black Lake or playing in the common room. Therefore, when Lin cast the disillusionment charm and followed Irina, who shouted the password to open the door into the Gryffindor common room, most of the Gryffindor lions were playing here, including Harry and Ron. This allowed Lin to not worry about running into Harry and his friend's love after sneaking into their dormitory. Soon, Lin En found Harry in his room according to the dormitory number Irina told him, and saw Peter Pettigrew locked in an alchemical cage on Ron's desk. Under the subtle wear and tear of the alchemical cage on Peter Pettigrew's body functions, the mouse lying in the cage looked extremely haggard. He didn't even have much strength to move. His eyes were closed, as if he was sleeping. But the mouse's body was constantly twitching, indicating that he seemed to be having a nightmare. This not only made him unable to replenish his energy through sleep, but was tortured by the content of the nightmare, and became more and more exhausted. Seeing Peter Pettigrew in such a state, Lin En, who had hidden his figure, raised his mouth slightly. Soul-seeing, Lin En raised his wand and shouted. A ray of light grey magic power emanated from the top of his wand and penetrated into the body of Peter Pettigrew, who had transformed into an animagus in the form of mouse. The spell of soul-seeing that Lin En just chanted was simplified from the obscure spell that summoned the special magic from hell, and the special magic that this castrated spell could summon was naturally weakened. This lighter grey magic no longer has the effect of giving souls to non-living things, and similar to the effect of the Imperious Curse, its only function is to obtain the vision of the cursed. Although Lin En could not grasp the underlying logic of the ancient magic of purgatory demon Golem, he could still fully understand the soul attachment curse, a modern magic that he simplified and castrated himself, and create a more convenient modern magic spell. Just like the fire spell simplified from the ancient magic of purgatory demon Golem also has its own spell burning flames, the soul attachment curse that Lin En created through secondary simplification and castration naturally also has its own spell. After the light grey magic entered Peter Pettigrew's body, Lin felt that there was a new field of vision in his vision, just like the split screen effect in mobile phones and computers in his previous life. This new field of vision only occupied a part of his field of vision, but he could see the whole picture clearly. With Lin's thoughts, this new field of vision belonging to Peter Pettigrew appeared and disappeared in his main field of vision. Lin could call out Peter Pettigrew's split screen field of vision in his main field of vision at any time, and make it disappear when it was not needed. After realizing this, Lin smiled again. In this way, everything is foolproof. This soul attaching spell only has the effect of obtaining vision, but cannot control Peter Pettigrew's body. In this case, let alone Peter Pettigrew, even if Voldemort himself was here, he would not be able to perceive the light grey magic dormant in Peter Pettigrew's body before he was cursed. After inserting vision into Peter Pettigrew, Lin repeated his original life, as if he had never been to the Gryffindor dormitory. Soon, Easter arrived, with Dementors roaming around, and Sirius Black breaking into Hogwarts Castle not long ago. The professor seemed to deliberately assign a lot of homework to the young wizards, in order to kill their energy, and keep them from taking risks. Not to mention the young wizards, even Lin and Irina spent most of the day to finish all their homework. You know, in addition to the required courses, they only chose one elective course. Chapter 240. The trajectory of destiny has shifted. Even Lin and Irina were like this, not to mention the little wizards like Hermione who chose all the elective courses. They almost rode from the night before the holiday to the early morning of the day of class, and only then did they finish all their homework. Of course, that was also because these little wizards did not use the time converter to reset the time for their homework. Otherwise, with the power of the time converter, they could be the most idle among all the little wizards. After Easter, it was the Quidditch Cup final, which was a match between the Gryffindor Quidditch team and the Slytherin Quidditch team. During the period before the game, the little lions of Gryffindor and the little snakes of Slytherin were on the verge of a fight. The little wizards of the other two colleges could often see little lions and little snakes quarreling or fighting in the corridor. This made Irina dare not go to Lin openly, so as not to be misunderstood as a traitor to Gryffindor by these tense little lions. Even the situation before the game was like this, let alone during the game. Exclamation mark. After the start of this unprecedented Quidditch match, the originally good sports event was almost turned into an air battle by the two teams. At the beginning of the game, when Angelina, the chaser of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, scored a goal, Marcus Flint, the captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team, fiercely controlled his flying broom to hit her. Not long after, Fred smashed Flint's head with his bat, causing his head to lean forward and his nose to hit his own broom, and finally his nose bled. In the following game, the players of the two teams also bumped into me. I bumped into you, you pulled my hair, and I pulled your flying broom. A good Quidditch game turned into a blatant aerial brawl, especially when Harry found the golden snitch and was only a few inches away from catching it. Malfoy grabbed Harry's firebolt and pulled it back. Not to mention Lee Jordan, who was scolding with a microphone. Even Professor McGonagall forgot to scold Lee Jordan and waved her fist and shouted something. Fortunately, Harry's talent as a seeker, which seemed to be wearing the aura of the protagonist, allowed him to surpass Malfoy, who was originally flying in front of him at the last moment, snatched the golden snitch, and won the game. After Gryffindor won the Quidditch Cup, the young wizards devoted themselves to reviewing for the upcoming final exams in June. Even the we're light winds, who usually don't take exams seriously, are now nervously preparing for this exam. Of course, this may also be because they are going to take the OWL exam organized by the Ministry of Magic this year, instead of the usual final exams. Not long after, the exam week arrived. Unlike other young wizards, Lin and Irina's nervousness was not because of the final exams they were facing, but because of what was going to happen next. For this reason, they had to gather in the room of requirement almost every day to exchange information. Now that the plot node at the end of the school year was getting closer and closer, even Lin and Irina, who were full of confidence on weekdays, began to get nervous, fearing that there would be any mistakes that would lead to the collapse of what happened in the end. Especially when they changed a lot of the original plot. In the original plotline, Minister of Magic Fudge brought people to Hogwarts Castle to execute Buckbeak, and now that Buckbeak was acquitted, they naturally would not come to Hogwarts Castle because of this matter to witness what happened to Sirius. Lin spread out a piece of parchment, holding a quill in his hand, and said. Irina sat beside him, holding her chin, looking at the words Lin wrote on the parchment with a quill. So, you plan to have the Ministry of Magic officials who are connected to the Rowell family come to Hogwarts Castle in the name of checking whether Hagrid is qualified to become a professor and witness the capture of Peter Pettigrew? Irina looked at what Lin En wrote in the letter and said softly. Lin En nodded slightly and said, if Buckbeak's matter is just a branch line, then the Ministry of Magic sent people to Hogwarts Castle and accidentally captured Sirius Black, which is a main line. We can easily change the occurrence of the branch line, but we have to let the plot line return to the main line, otherwise, no one knows what kind of collapse will happen in the future. Soon, Lin En finished writing the letter in his hand, and asked the little owl emergency food to send it to Rowell Castle. Those Ministry of Magic officials who had dealings with the Rowell family were extremely efficient. Under the promise of a lot of benefits from the Rowell family, on the 4th day of the exam week, they sent back the news that the Minister of Magic Fudge would come to Hogwarts Castle in person to confirm whether Hagrid could continue to serve as a professor. In addition, on the last day of the exam week, after Harry finished the final exam of divination, he told Irina and others a prophecy from Professor Trelawney. The Dark Lord lies alone, friendless, abandoned by his men, and his servant has been chained for 12 years, and is gradually wearing out. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will break free of his chains, get rid of the wear and tear, and set out to join his master with the sword of Damocles hanging over his head. The Dark Lord will return with the help of his servant, more powerful and more terrible than before. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will set out to join his master. Harry tried his best to imitate Professor Trelawney's tone, and said the prophecy he heard. After learning the content of this prophecy, Ron and Hermione talked a lot, but Irina fell into silence. Compared with the one in the original book, this prophecy is not much different at first glance, but when she read it carefully, she could find several subtle differences. For example, his servant has been chained for 12 years, and is gradually wearing out, and this servant will break free from the chains, and get rid of wear and tear, both of which mention the word wear and tear, which does not exist in the original book. However, Irina could guess that the so-called wear and tear was the weakening of Peter Pettigrew's physical functions by Lin's alchemical cage. But the sentence with the sword of Damocles hanging over his head was something Irina did not understand. What exactly does the sword of Damocles refer to? Perhaps the trajectory of fate has shifted with the arrival of the two. Could it be that our plan will fail? Although there are a lot more contents in the prophecy, the servant still got rid of the chains, and the Dark Lord still made a comeback. Irina stared at Harry and the other two who were discussing not far away, and whispered softly, "Please give me rewards and monthly tickets." Chapter 241. When he is no longer useful, his death will be near. At this time, Harry and the other two had stopped discussing Professor Trelawney's prophecy, because there was a more important matter in front of them. Hermione said seriously, "Hagrid told me that Minister of Magic Fudge and his people will go to Hagrid's hut today to confirm whether Hagrid is qualified to continue to be a professor of care of magical creatures." Hearing Hermione's words, Harry and Ron both focused on this matter. As for Professor Trelawney's prophecy, who they thought was an out-and-out liar, they threw it out of their minds. "I think we should go visit Hagrid. After we finish dinner, I just go back to get my invisibility cloak." Harry said so. Irina said happily, "Okay, the three of you use the invisibility cloak together, and I can perform the disillusionment charm." In this way, the four returned to the hall to prepare for dinner. However, Harry, Ron and Hermione, who had something on their minds, did not notice that Irina turned a corner and walked out from another direction after returning to the hall with them, and did not have dinner with them. A few minutes later, the room that took the form of a meeting room was in the request granting room. "You use the two-way mirror to contact me to come here temporarily. Do you have any new information?" Lin asked calmly, while sitting at the table. Irina nodded, and she told Lin the content of Professor Trelawney's prophecy. After noticing the changes between this prophecy and the original book, Lin's eyes sank slightly, and he rubbed his hands together, as if thinking about something. Irina whispered, "I don't know if we should continue to follow the original plan. After all, the so-called sword of Damocles in the prophecy is something we cannot understand, which means we cannot effectively deal with it." Hearing this, Lin raised his head slightly, and he whispered, "Perhaps I know what the sword of Damocles is." Looking at Irina's gaze at him, Lin waved his wand and chanted a spell softly. After a few breaths, a ball of light grey magic appeared between the two of them. Just by staring at this light grey magic, Irina felt as if she heard a series of hazy whispers, as if some invisible being was talking in her ear. "This is a spell I simplified from the Purgatory Demon Puppet, called the Soul Possession spell. The effect is to insert my vision into the cursed person, and I can obtain the cursed person's vision at any time," Lin En said lightly. After learning about the effect of the soul curse, Irina suddenly realized, and she said, "You asked me to help you sneak into the Gryffindor dormitory last time. Was it to release the soul curse on Peter Pettigrew?" In other words, the sword of Damocles in the prophecy is actually the field of vision you inserted into Peter Pettigrew. You can know his location at any time and rush there to kill him. Lin smiled and said, "That's right." Irina frowned and said, "Then, should we change the plan?" Lin said thoughtfully, "Do you think that after we kill Peter Pettigrew, will Voldemort be resurrected according to the original trajectory next year? I mean, will our advantage of foresight in this world still exist?" Irina frowned even deeper. Then we can't just let Peter Pettigrew escape like this, can we? Don't forget, we still have to help Sirius get rid of the crime. Lin chuckled and said, no, of course not. The prophecy says that Peter Pettigrew will escape, but that doesn't mean he will escape at the original time. Even if Peter Pettigrew escaped on the way to Azkaban prison, after being tried by the Ministry of Magic, wouldn't that be considered an escape? Irina looked up abruptly, her ice blue eyes brightened. You mean, our plan tonight is carried out as normal, we catch Peter Pettigrew and exonerate Sirius, and on the way Peter Pettigrew is sent to Azkaban, we deliberately create chaos, to let Peter Pettigrew escape. Lin nodded lightly, his dark red eyes seemed to become deeper. Yes, the main part of our plan is still tonight. All we have to do is to exonerate Sirius. As for Peter Pettigrew, I'm afraid he can't just die like this. He needs to complete his mission in the trajectory of destiny, which is to resurrect Voldemort and get the plot back on track. After that, he will be useless. By then, it will be easy to find him through the vision I inserted, kill him, or let him die of organ exhaustion. Lin En said indifferently. Hearing this, Irina nodded in agreement. Then, when he resurrects Voldemort, his usefulness will be exhausted, and that day will be his death. Irina said so. Lin En looked at Irina with soft eyes and said softly, okay, you should go back and meet them. The next plan still needs your intervention, right? I will wait for you in the Shrieking Shack. Irina agreed, left the room of requirement, and ran straight to the Gryffindor common room. According to the current time, Harry and his friends should have finished dinner and got the invisibility cloak. They will definitely find out that she is missing. She must return to their team before Harry and his friends come to look for her in a big way. When Irina recited the password and opened the door of the Gryffindor common room, she cast a layer of disillusionment on herself. As expected, when she disappeared and walked into the Gryffindor common room, she saw Harry and the other two with anxious faces. Irina did not show her figure, but quickly went to the direction of the men's dormitory and slipped into Harry's dormitory. She pulled open Ron's curtains and saw the alchemical cage placed on Ron's bed and Peter Pettigrew sleeping soundly in the alchemical cage. How can a wonderful show be without its protagonist? Irina chuckled and stuffed the alchemical cage into her pocket that was cast with the Traceless extension charm. After Irina learned the strong Traceless extension charm from Newt, she used almost every place on her body that could hold things, and the pockets on her clothes were no exception. Now each of her pockets has at least the space equivalent to a small room, so it is naturally no difficulty to put down a mere alchemical cage. After taking the alchemical cage containing Peter Pettigrew, Irina returned to the Gryffindor common room, and after walking to the entrance of the girls' dormitory, she revealed herself and pretended that she had just walked out of the girls' dormitory. Chapter 242 I'm afraid you are the ones who have nowhere to escape. Irina, you're finally here. We've been looking for you for a long time. Harry saw Irina coming out of the door of the girls' dormitory, and he hurriedly greeted her. Irina smiled embarrassedly and said, sorry, I just had something to do, so I went back for a while. Let's go without delay. Harry and the others wanted to say something, but seeing that Irina was ready to leave, they had to nod, and quickly got out of the Gryffindor common room and headed towards the castle entrance. In less than 5 minutes, the four of them had arrived at the gate of Hogwarts Castle. Irina waved her wand and cast a layer of disillusionment spell on herself, while Harry, Ron and Hermione hid in the invisibility cloak and headed towards Hagrid's hut. When the four walked down the stone steps and came to the field, the sunset had already fallen behind the forbidden forest, and the afterglow of the sunset dyed the treetops golden. You're here. After Irina knocked on the door of Hagrid's hut, Hagrid opened the door, as if he had expected it, and let the four people in. Harry looked at Hagrid with some worry and said, Hagrid, I heard that the Ministry of Magic will come to test you today. Hagrid sat on a bench the size of a small table, making tea for Irina and others. There was no trace of tension on his face. Hagrid smiled and said, don't worry, Harry, it's just a process. When they know my ability in the care of magical creatures class, they will definitely restore my qualifications as a professor. Hagrid looked very comfortable. He had been wronged many times in just 50 years, and this was the first time he experienced the feeling of being a relative. This feeling is really great. Seeing that even Hagrid himself looked relaxed, Harry and the others' tense minds also relaxed a little. They chatted and laughed, waiting for the Ministry of Magic to arrive. 10 minutes later, Hagrid suddenly stood up and looked out the window. They are coming. Irina walked quickly to the window. She saw a group of people walking down the steps of Hogwarts Castle from a distance and walking towards Hagrid's hut where she was. Among the group of people, Professor Dumbledore was walking in the front, his silver beard gleaming in the setting sun, and on his left was Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, and behind them were several officials from the Ministry of Magic. You should go. Hagrid turned around and said to the 4 people, we can't let them see you here. Go. Irina nodded, no objection. So Hagrid walked to the back of the house, opened the back door leading to the backyard, and let Harry, Ron, Hermione and Irina leave through this door. After leaving Hagrid's hut, Harry muttered, I hope it's really like Hagrid said, just to test Hagrid's skills, and then I can restore Hagrid's identity. Ron was still a little worried, and he walked forward a little uneasily. Just as Harry and others were about to return to Hogwarts Castle, Harry suddenly stopped. What's wrong, Harry? Ron asked curiously. Harry did not answer Ron's question directly. He was trembling all over, with a look of disbelief in his eyes. He slowly raised his right arm and pointed forward. Look there. Following Harry's arm, Ron and Hermione were also stunned. More than 100 meters in front of the 4 people, a figure in a black wizard robe was standing there quietly, with eyes full of murderous intent and madness staring at their direction. The face under the hood of the black wizard robe was the fugitive Sirius Black who appeared in the newspapers every day. Black. Expelliarmus. At this time, Harry, who recalled the news he heard in the 3 broomsticks that Sirius Black had killed his parents, could no longer control himself. He roared, waved his wand and cast a disarming spell at Sirius. Facing Harry's slightly immature disarming spell, Sirius just slightly turned sideways to dodge it. Sirius did not stay for long, but turned around and ran away quickly. Stop, you damned traitor. Seeing the enemy who killed his parents, Harry's eyes seemed to turn red. He seemed to have lost his mind and threw away the invisibility cloak on his body and chased in the direction of Sirius. Harry, Ron and Hermione were shocked. They ran up and tried to catch up with Harry, who had lost his mind. Ron and Hermione knew how powerful Sirius Black was. They also knew that Harry was committing suicide by doing this. As Harry's best friends, they had to stop Harry's behavior. The 2 threw the invisibility cloak into the air and then chased Harry madly in the direction he was going. Irina, who was left behind, raised her hand to catch the invisibility cloak that fell lightly and laughed dumbly. Irina folded the invisibility cloak and put it away. Then she walked straight towards the Homping Willow slowly. According to the agreement between her and Sirius, Sirius would first take Harry and the others to run around the edge of the Forbidden Forest and then go to the Shrieking Shack through the Homping Willow. Therefore, Irina didn't need to practice long distance running with Harry and the others. She could just go to the final destination and wait for them. When Irina arrived near the Homping Willow, Sirius just happened to sneak Harry and the other 2 into the Homping Willow's attack range. Sirius just raised his wand, and a stone flew up under the effect of the levitation charm and hit the scar of the Homping Willow. Sirius himself quickly got into the entrance of the secret passage and went to the Shrieking Shack. Seeing this, Harry and the other 2 who followed Sirius naturally plunged into the secret passage without hesitation. After the 4 people, Irina came to the entrance of the secret passage. She seemed to have thought of something. She first took out Harry's invisibility cloak and placed it on the ground, then got into the secret passage and chased the 4 people. At this time, Sirius had returned to the Shrieking Shack, and Harry and the other 2 chased him in from the door. Black, you have nowhere to run. Harry pointed his wand at Sirius and roared. Sirius, who had walked to the end of the Shrieking Shack, turned around, showing his yellow teeth, and chuckled. Obviously. Expelliarmus. Sirius swung his wand violently, and 3 red beams flew towards Harry, Ron, and Hermione respectively. The 3 disarming spells sent out at the same time made the wands in Harry and the other 2's hands fly out at the same time, flying to Sirius' feet, and were picked up by Sirius. But I think you are the ones who have nowhere to run. Sirius showed a playful smile. Chapter 243 Irina betrayed us. After finding that their wands were disarmed by Sirius, Ron and Hermione were horrified. But Harry, whose mind was controlled by anger, ignored his wand that was taken away. Seeing that he could not use magic to attack Sirius, he simply roared, rushed towards Sirius, and punched Sirius' handsome face. Originally, Sirius just wanted to scare Harry and the others, and did not really intend to attack them, so he was quite relaxed. Therefore, facing Harry's sudden punch, Sirius seemed a little caught off guard. Sirius wanted to retreat, but Harry grabbed his collar with his other hand. Then, Sirius felt a pain in his left eye, and his head tilted back, and hit the wall behind him. When Sirius shook his head, and came to his senses, his left eye had turned black. Expelliarmus. Seeing that Harry was going to continue to attack him, Sirius quickly cast another disarming spell, knocking Harry out, and letting Harry fall on Ron and Hermione, who caught him. Harry seemed to have regained his sanity at this time. He looked at Sirius, who was pointing his wand at him, and did not dare to act rashly. It's time for death to come. Sirius grinned. He saw Irina, who had appeared at the door of the Shrieking Shack with an all-chemical cage in her hand. However, Harry and the other two standing opposite him did not notice Irina's arrival. They thought that the person Sirius wanted to kill was Harry. Ron stopped Harry with one hand and shouted angrily, "If you want to kill Harry, you must kill us too." Hearing this, a light seemed to flash in Sirius's gloomy eyes. Sirius said lightly, "Only one person will be killed here today." Harry, who had fallen into misunderstanding, stared at Sirius with red eyes. He growled, "Why? You didn't care last time, did you? In order to hunt down Peter Pettigrew, you slaughtered so many muggles. How come you changed your heart in Azkaban prison?" Seeing that Harry was still provoking Sirius, Hermione pulled his hand anxiously and whispered, "Stop it, Harry. He killed my father and mother." Harry roared, "He also wants to kill me, no way." Looking at Harry with a crazy look, Sirius was stunned. He lowered the brim of his hat and said, "I think you may not have figured out the situation yet. I don't deny what you said just now, but if you knew the whole process." "The whole process?" Harry's eyes became redder and redder. "You betrayed them to Voldemort. I only need to know this much." Harry now seemed to be completely unable to communicate. Sirius sighed and shook his head, and cast his eyes on Irina at the door. He said lightly, "Bring him here, I think. Maybe this way Harry can understand everything." As Sirius' voice fell, Harry and the other two subconsciously turned their heads. They only then found Irina at the door of the Shrieking Shack. "Irina, come on, help me defeat Black," Harry shouted anxiously. Irina turned a deaf ear to Harry's words, and her face was full of indifference. She held the all-chemical cage in her hand, and passed through them in the expectant eyes of Harry and the other two, and came to Sirius. Irina put down the all-chemical cage, opened the door of the cage, and poured out the sleeping Peter Pettigrew. She whispered, "It's all here, Mr. Black." Seeing this scene, Harry didn't know what happened. He looked at Irina with anger. "Irina, you are in the same group with Black. You betrayed us." Hermione's eyes were full of disbelief. She could never imagine that Irina, who treated them like brothers and sisters, would actually betray them and turn to Sirius Black, a wanted criminal. Irina turned around, and when she cast her eyes on the three people, her indifferent expression finally changed a little. "You may think that I'm the one who betrayed you, but first, you have to understand the truth of the matter." Irina looked at the three people and said so. Harry roared, "The truth? Sirius Black betrayed my parents, and you betrayed us. This is the truth." As he said that, Harry wanted to pounce on Irina and Sirius again. However, just when Harry wanted to lift his feet, he suddenly found that his feet had been frozen in place by thick ice without knowing when. Not only Harry, but also Ron and Hermione's feet were frozen in the ice, making it difficult for them to move. Just when the three of them were in despair, a new voice sounded from below them. The muffled footsteps came up through the cracks in the floor, as if someone was walking downstairs. "We are upstairs." After sensing the possible existence of reinforcement, Hermione suddenly screamed, "We are upstairs. Sirius Black is here. Come on." Hermione glanced at Irina and Sirius standing opposite them, hoping to find some panic in their eyes. However, Hermione was disappointed. Whether it was Irina or Sirius, their expressions did not change at all when they faced the possibility that there might be another person downstairs. The former was because he knew the identity of the visitor, while the latter was because of his trust in Lin and Irina, which made him believe that they could control the situation well and prevent accidents from happening. Sure enough, when the door was opened with a bang, the person who appeared at the door was Professor Lupin. Professor Lupin, please save us. Irina and Black have teamed up. Harry looked at Professor Lupin with hope. But at this moment, something even more desperate happened. Just like Irina before, Professor Lupin turned a deaf ear to Harry's cries. He looked at Sirius with a complicated look. Have you really changed? Sirius nodded silently. Professor Lupin sighed, lowered the wand in his hand, walked to Sirius, and hugged him hard. Seeing this scene, Hermione shouted in disbelief. She questioned Professor Lupin, saying that she had been hiding the fact that Professor Lupin was a werewolf, but Professor Lupin failed their expectations. Hermione believed that it was Professor Lupin who helped Sirius break into the castle and wanted to kill Harry. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244. Snape is the winner of the Oscar. You are one of the smartest little witches I have ever met, Hermione. Professor Lupin remained calm in the face of Hermione's accusation, but I didn't help Sirius. If you give me a chance, I can explain. Sirius. Professor Lupin gestured to Sirius, who nodded slightly, and threw Harry's and the other two's wands back to the three of them. Harry caught the wand in disbelief. He couldn't imagine that Sirius would actually return his wand to him. What on earth did the other party want to do? To humiliate him? Exclamation mark. Professor Lupin put away his wand and said lightly, now you have weapons, but I don't. Are you willing to listen to me? Harry glanced at Professor Lupin hesitantly. In his peripheral vision, he saw Irina still standing beside Sirius. Even Irina stood on Black's side. Is there really something hidden? Exclamation mark. Although the previous anger made Harry subconsciously think that Irina had betrayed them, after his reason gradually returned to his mind, he recalled what Irina had done, and his trust in the big sister made him rethink whether the matter was true or not. In the end, Harry nodded gently. So Sirius stood up and told him about his suggestion to James to change the secret keeper of the Fidelius charm to Peter Pettigrew, and Peter Pettigrew betrayed James and put the blame on himself. Everyone thought Sirius killed Peter, but in fact, Peter is still alive. This is Peter Pettigrew, an animagus in the form of mouse. Professor Lupin took over the conversation and pointed to Scabbers, who was knocked to the ground by Irina from the alchemy cage and was slowly waking up. It was not until then that Ron discovered Scabbers at Irina's feet. He exclaimed, Scabbers. Crazy, you are all crazy. It's obviously my mouse. How could it be an animagus? Even Hermione echoed with a trembling voice, yes, Professor Lupin. Scabbers can't be Peter Pettigrew. It's impossible. You know it's impossible. Why is it impossible? Professor Lupin asked calmly, as if they were still in a defense against the dark arts class. Because if Peter Pettigrew is an animagus, people will know. We learned about animagus in Professor McGonagall's class. I looked up the information when I was doing my homework. The Ministry of Magic has records of wizards who can turn into animals. There are registers showing what animals they can turn into, and there are marks and so on. I looked up Professor McGonagall in the register. There are only 7 animagus in this century, and Peter Pettigrew's name is not on it. Hermione said so. She disagreed with Professor Lupin's statement. Hearing this, Professor Lupin chuckled and said, you are right, Hermione, but you don't know that there are more animagus in the world who have not been registered with the Ministry of Magic. In other words, unless they want to be professors and need to show their animagus forms to students, most animagus prefer to use it as their trump card and are unwilling to register with the Ministry of Magic. Perhaps I should let Irina explain this to you. As he spoke, Professor Lupin turned his eyes to Irina. Hearing Professor Lupin's words, Irina looked at Professor Lupin unexpectedly. She didn't understand how Professor Lupin found out that she was an animagus. In fact, when Lin and Irina went to the full moon, where the crystal vial was buried, they were too excited and focused on the animagus practice. They did not notice Professor Lupin, who was passing by dozens of meters away and was about to go to the Shrieking Shack to transform. It was on that day that Professor Lupin learned that the two were trying the animagus practice. Although Professor Lupin did not witness the transformation of the two, he had no doubt that Lin and Irina would succeed given their intelligence and magic level. Professor Lupin is right, Hermione, because I'm an illegal animagus. Irina's beautiful ice blue eyes stared at Hermione, and she said softly. Irina's figure suddenly jumped forward. Her body shrank rapidly in the air, and when she landed on the ground, she was already in the form of a snow fox. This is incredible. Irina, when did you? Seeing the extremely cute snow fox on the ground, Hermione covered her mouth, her eyes full of shock. At this time, Irina had already transformed back to her original body. She retreated to her original position, as if nothing had happened. She glanced at Professor Lupin and said, now that the proper explanation has been given, it's time to present the final evidence to Harry and the others, and let Peter Pettigrew return to his original form. While Irina was speaking, the door of the Shrieking Shack opened and closed unconsciously, but no one noticed this abnormality, except Irina, who subconsciously glanced there. Hearing Irina's words, Professor Lupin nodded, and he walked forward, intending to use the animagus counter curse to forcibly transform Peter Pettigrew back to his original form. Don't move. A werewolf, a criminal, and a little witch who is known as a genius are actually hanging out together. Haha, how interesting. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from behind Harry and the others. Severus Snape took off his invisibility cloak and pointed his wand at Professor Lupin, making him dare not act rashly. His cold eyes swept over everyone. Professor Snape threw aside the invisibility cloak in his hand and said in a sarcastic tone, I found this under the Homping Willow. It's very useful. Potter, I have to thank you. I think Hogwarts Castle can no longer accommodate a werewolf like you, Lupin. And you, Black, I think the Dementors would be happy to give you a kiss. Professor Snape's tone was cold. Hearing his words, Professor Lupin and Sirius both turned pale. At this moment, Harry suddenly stood up, his firm eyes staring into Snape's eyes. No, you can't do this. There may be hidden secrets. If we don't investigate it clearly, then we may have wronged a good guy. Professor Snape sneered and said, wrongly accuse a good guy? Ha, don't let me guess the psychology of werewolves and criminals. Get out of the way, Potter. Facing Professor Snape's order, Harry shouted fearlessly, you are so pitiful. Just because they played a trick on you in school, you even refused to. Harry's words were like igniting a powder keg. Snape's expression became crazy. Shut up, don't talk to me like that. Like father, like son, Potter. I just saved your life, you should kneel on the ground and thank me. In fact, you deserve to be killed by him. Died like your father, because he was too proud and refused to believe that he had misjudged Black. Get out of the way, or I will not be polite. Get out of the way, Potter. Staring at Snape, Harry seemed to have made some kind of decision. He suddenly raised his wand. Disarm you. Harry roared, but it seemed that it was not just his voice. 3 red lights burst out at the same time, and the other 2 red lights came from Ron and Hermione. Snape didn't seem to expect Harry and the others to dare to attack. He was hit by 3 disarming spells at the same time. His whole body flew up and hit the wall behind him. Then he fell to the ground, blood oozing from his hair, and fainted. This year's Oscar statuette must belong to Professor Snape. Irina, who was not far away, saw this scene and her mouth twitched wildly. Chapter 245. We have so many ways to pry open his mouth. You know, from the solemn look in Professor Snape's eyes, when he looked at Sirius and Professor Lupin just now, he was obviously in a state of extreme vigilance. Not to mention the 3 disarming curses from Harry and the others. Even if Professor Lupin, Sirius and Irina attacked together, Professor Snape would not have any problem dodging them all, but it would be no problem to block them with the shield charm. And even if Professor Snape was in an extremely relaxed state, with Professor Snape's magic level and combat awareness, it would not be a problem for him to just dodge the clumsy and loudly shouted disarming curses from Harry and the others. Even if Irina was in this position, Irina could dodge the 3 disarming curses without any skills or disguises, just by relying on her own muscle memory. Therefore, Irina was sure that Professor Snape would be knocked unconscious by Harry and the others, which was completely a deliberate act. What a good and responsible professor. A good actor, Irina thought to herself. At the same time, when this farce was happening, Peter Pettigrew seemed to have realized his current situation. While everyone's eyes were focused on Professor Snape, he planned to use his small body to slip out of this place of trouble before everyone could react. Crucio. However, just when Peter Pettigrew thought he could escape, a dark red beam of light flashing with extremely dangerous light burst out from the void and hit the mouse that was missing a finger. After hearing the spell of the Cruciatus curse, everyone's eyes subconsciously moved to the direction of the sound. In the corner of the room, a figure wearing a wizard robe of Slytherin College suddenly appeared there. The boy with dark red eyes was looking coldly at the screaming and struggling mouse on the ground and maintained the magic output of the Cruciatus curse in his hand. Lin? Almost everyone, including Professor Lupin, exclaimed. Irina, who knew in advance that Lin would hide in the shrieking shack and wait and see, did not show much surprise when Lin suddenly appeared. Looking at the people who were looking at him, Lin's face was indifferent, and he said lightly, "You know, you almost let this dirty rat escape." Hearing Lin's words, Harry and the others turned their attention back to the rat on the ground. Only Professor Lupin was still looking at Lin worriedly. "Lin, that's the unforgivable curse. You." Hearing this, Lin stopped casting the spell in his hand and put a pendant with a snow lotus pattern on his neck. I don't know if it was my illusion, but after Lin put on the pendant, Professor Lupin found that Lin's expression seemed to calm down all of a sudden, and it could even be said to be indifferent. Just like a descending god, without desire, without emotion. When facing evil, you must have ways to deal with them. Professor Lupin. Oh no, I should probably call you Uncle Lupin at this time. If I guess correctly, you should also know the 3 unforgivable curses, right? Lin En looked at Professor Lupin calmly. Professor Lupin was speechless. He had indeed learned the 3 unforgivable curses a long time ago. Lin En said softly, "Whether it is magic, alchemy or unforgivable curses, they are only part of the wizard's combat power. Just like the greatest white wizard Professor Dumbledore is also proficient in black magic, who can prove it is wrong? If you have to say that there is something wrong with me learning the 3 unforgivable curses, then maybe I learned it too early." Professor Lupin stopped talking. He believed from the bottom of his heart that what Lin En said was right. Even if Lin En never touched black magic, when the future war happened and they had this need, he would even teach Lin En how to use the 3 unforgivable curses. Now he thought that Lin En should not touch the 3 unforgivable curses, perhaps just because the other party was a 4th grade little wizard. At this time, Sirius had raised his wand and used the Animagus counter curse on the mice on the ground. With a blow light, the mice on the ground kept twisting. Soon, a very short man appeared in front of everyone. His hair looked sparse and dull, and there was a large bald spot on his head. The man looked wrinkled, like a fat man who had lost a lot of weight in a short period of time. His skin was dirty, almost like the fur of mouse. His pointed nose and watery green eyes still had some characteristics of mouse. Not only that, everyone also found that his sparse hair had turned completely white, and even his eyebrows and beard had become pale. Peter Pettigrew now looked like an old man who was about to die. Even a simple movement could make his face look painful. Obviously, it was the power of Lin's alchemical cage to weaken human functions that took effect on Peter Pettigrew. Although Peter Pettigrew was only middle-aged at most, his physical condition looked worse than that of a muggle man over 100 years old. Peter Pettigrew looked a bit painful. He glanced around and breathed very quickly, but everyone could see that his eyes were always looking towards the door. There was no doubt that, even though Peter Pettigrew's body was in such a bad state, he still did not give up the desire to escape. "Hello, Peter Pettigrew, long time no see," Professor Lupin said to Peter Pettigrew in a seemingly happy tone, but his eyes were full of coldness. Looking at the people around him who were looking at him with unfriendly eyes, Peter Pettigrew wanted to cry, but had no tears. He glanced at the door again, and said in a shrill voice, "Remus. Remus, and Sirius, my friend, my old friend." Seeing the disgusting face of this damn traitor, Sirius seemed to be unable to control himself again. He wanted to raise his arm holding the wand. However, Three hands, one big and two small, grabbed his wrist at the same time. Professor Lupin, Lin and Irina all grabbed his wrists and shook their heads at him, indicating that this was not a good time. Seeing this, Sirius could only grit his teeth and give up, but he still looked at Peter Pettigrew with a murderous look. Professor Lupin, there is no need for us to confront this dirty guy. Take him back to Professor Dumbledore. By then, it will be easy to make him tell the truth. Legitimacy, truth serum, and even my alchemy, we have so many ways to pry open his mouth. Lin said with a smile, but the smile on his face was so eerie and terrifying in Peter Pettigrew's eyes. Chapter 246. You go first, I'll stay. Hearing this, Professor Lupin nodded in agreement. He turned around and walked in front, pushing open the door of the Shrieking Shack. Lin bent down and took out a bundle of golden ropes from his pocket. He used the bundle of golden ropes to tie up Peter Pettigrew tightly so that he couldn't even move a finger. After seeing the bundle of golden ropes, Sirius realized that this was the rope that Lin used to tie himself up on Halloween night. He was relieved. With this golden rope that could seal the magic power of wizards, Peter Pettigrew would have no chance of escaping. Even if the transformation of an animagus does not require magic, wizards also need to use their own magic as a trigger to control the occurrence of transformation. It seems that this damn traitor will eventually be judged, and he will also be vindicated. Thinking of this, Sirius finally smiled. Zombie floating. Lin and Irina chanted spells to the unconscious Professor Snape and Peter Pettigrew, who was tied up with golden ropes. Professor Snape and Peter Pettigrew seemed to have invisible ropes tied to their wrists, necks, and knees. They were like puppets being pulled up by invisible threads, with their feet hanging limply a few inches above the ground, floating steadily. At this time, Professor Lupin walked in front to lead the way, while Lin and Irina used spells to control Professor Snape and Peter Pettigrew to walk forward, and Harry and the other two followed silently behind. Everything that happened in the Shrieking Shack today was a huge shock to the three of them. First, Sirius appeared suddenly, and then their best friend Irina and their beloved Professor Lupin were suspected of betrayal. Then the whole thing was reversed and the truth was reversed. And finally Lin suddenly appeared, and was cast with the Cruciatus Curse. To be honest, no one present had expected Lin to cast the unforgivable curse in public. What was even more incredible to Harry and the other two was that neither Professor Lupin nor Sirius had given Lin a single word of advice out of concern, and they had almost turned a blind eye to what he had done. Wasn't it agreed that anyone who used the unforgivable curse would be imprisoned in Azkaban? Exclamation mark. The status of the Ministry of Magic's legal provisions in the eyes of Harry and the others was being unknowingly disintegrated. At this moment, Sirius, who had been walking in front with Professor Lupin, suddenly slowed down and fell beside Harry. We will soon hand over Peter Pettigrew, Sirius suddenly said to Harry beside him. Do you know what this means? Harry nodded slightly and said, you are free. Yes. Sirius said, but I don't know if anyone has told you. I'm your godfather. Harry nodded gently again. His tone was very light. Well, I know. Sirius said in a somewhat unnatural tone. It's like this. Your parents appointed me to be your guardian, in case they encounter an accident. Harry did not speak. He silently waited for Sirius's next words, and a hint of expectation rose in his heart. Did Sirius mean what he thought? Of course, if you want to live with your aunt and uncle, I can understand, Sirius whispered. But, well, think about it. Once I'm cleared of the charges, if you want a different home. Harry's heart swelled immediately, and he couldn't wait to ask, what? Live with you? Leave the Dursleys? Sirius didn't know what kind of life Harry led in the Dursleys. He mistakenly thought that Harry was unwilling to leave the family, where he had lived for more than 10 years. He only heard him say in a low tone, of course, I don't think you would want to. I can understand. I just think Hearing this, Harry looked at Sirius beside him in disbelief. He shouted, are you confused? Of course I'm willing to leave the Dursleys. Do you have a house? When can I move in? Sirius turned around in surprise and confirmed again. Are you willing? Really? Yes, I really do, said Harry. At this time, Irina, who was walking in front and holding Peter Pettigrew with a zombie floating spell, turned around and said lightly, "Mr. Black, if you knew what kind of life Harry lived in the Dursleys, you would not say those words just now." Sirius frowned. From Irina's tone, he could probably guess that Harry didn't seem to be living well in the Dursleys. Sirius cast his eyes on Harry beside him. Feeling Sirius's gaze, Harry sighed and told him about the treatment he had received in the Dursleys for more than 10 years. After learning about Harry's experience in the Dursleys, Sirius's eyes suddenly bulged with anger. He said angrily, "How dare they? Those muggles." Seeing Sirius so angry, Harry shook his head and said, "Don't say so much. They have adopted me for 11 years after all. I'm very happy, Godfather, that I can live with you in the future." Soon, the group had left the secret passage and arrived on the ground. The ground was very dark at this time, and only a glimmer of light could be seen from the windows of Hogwarts Castle in the distance. Everyone silently crossed the venue and walked towards the castle. But at this moment, a cloud in the sky slowly moved away, and the blurred reflections of everyone suddenly appeared on the ground, and everyone was bathed in the snow-like moonlight. However, feeling the bright moonlight sprinkled on their bodies, the group had no intention of appreciating the moon, especially Harry and the other two. They were already terrified. "Oh no, today is a full moon," Hermione said in horror, and she looked at Professor Lupin who was walking in front. "You know, Professor Lupin didn't drink the medicine today, which means he is not safe." Roar. Accompanied by a terrible roar, Professor Lupin's head kept stretching. His body also became longer, his shoulders arched, hair grew on his face and hands, and his fingers were bent into claws. "Damn it, you go first, I'll stop him." Seeing this, Sirius's face changed drastically. He roared at the people in front of him, turned into a big black dog in the form of an animagus, and was about to pounce on Professor Lupin who had turned into a werewolf. However, when Sirius jumped up and flew in the air, he was caught by Lin, who looked indifferent, and then thrown towards Harry and the others. "You will need to confront Peter Pettigrew in person in front of Professor Dumbledore and those Ministry of Magic officials later. Leave this to me," Lin said in a cold tone. But Sirius was not convinced, but he remembered that when they fought on Halloween night, Lin completely beat him. In the end, he was silent, did not speak, and followed the pace of Harry and the others. He understood that with Lin's magic level, even if he could stay in the form of an animagus to help Lin, he would mostly be a burden to Lin. Looking at the group of people going away, Lin En's mouth curled up slightly. He turned around and looked at the werewolf with only madness in his eyes. "Please give me rewards and monthly tickets." Chapter 247 I'm willing to take truth serum. Facing the werewolf not far away, Lin En was not in a hurry to use his fire magic or the alchemy he was good at. "It's time to test my fighting ability in the animagus form," Lin En said lightly. Since Lin En learned animagus and was able to transform into a snow wolf, Lin En has never changed his animagus form again, let alone fighting in the animagus form. And now Professor Lupin in the werewolf form is undoubtedly the best tool for Lin En to test his fighting ability in the animagus form. Roar. At this time, the werewolf Lupin roared again and pounced in the direction of Lin En. Looking at the werewolf Lupin who was so close, Lin En's face was not panicked at all. He jumped back, and when he landed, he had turned into a snow wolf that was a few points stronger than the werewolf Lupin. Lin En's snow white hair shone brightly under the moonlight. Even though Lupin, the werewolf who relied on the moonlight to transform, was somewhat inferior to this extremely strong snow wolf. Roar. Lin En also roared, and with a fierce swing of his right claw, he rushed towards Lupin, who was looking shocked. 5 blood marks suddenly appeared on Lupin's face, and Lupin's body flew backwards under this powerful claw, and fell hard on the ground 5 or 6 meters away. After feeling the pain on his face, Lupin's bloodiness was also aroused. With red eyes, he rushed towards Lin En, as if he wanted to fight to the death with Lin En. However, before Lupin could get close to Lin En jumped up high and rushed towards Lupin, and the sharp wolf claws once again slapped Lupin's chest. In an instant, blood splashed. The chest of the werewolf Lupin was already covered in blood from the claw that did not hold back at all. The damage caused by this claw to the werewolf Lupin was not low. After the werewolf Lupin was knocked down again, he was unable to stand up for a while. Seeing this, Lin En did not stop. He slapped forward with his claw again, knocking the werewolf Lupin who was struggling to get up to the ground. After confirming that the werewolf Lupin had no power to resist, Lin En stepped back a few steps and then changed back to human form. It seems that, although my animagus form cannot cast magic, it is stronger than many magical animals in terms of physical strength. Even the werewolves with strong physical bodies are not the opponent of my claws. Lin En thought so in his heart. When he raised his magic wand, a new bundle of golden ropes flew out and tied up the werewolf Lupin. After doing this, Lin En recited several healing spells to the werewolf Lupin, and after roughly healing the opponent's injuries, he stuffed him into the secret passage. Although Professor Lupin in werewolf form has a strong self-healing ability, the damage caused by Lin En's 3 claws just now is really not low. Lin En is worried that Professor Lupin's injuries will not be completely healed when he returns to human form, and then he will bleed to death there. After settling Professor Lupin, Lin En rushed to the direction of Hogwarts Castle. If he guessed correctly, the show has already begun. At the same time, in the principal's office, a dozen people sat solemnly on the chairs, transformed by Dumbledore's magic. They all looked serious. So, the real murderer of the tragedy that year was Peter Pettigrew, and Sirius Black was just wronged? Dumbledore sat behind the desk. He took a sip of tea on the table, and Professor Snape, who woke up slowly, sat beside him at his request. In front of the desk, the two parties sat on both sides of the office, clearly separated. On the left side was the Ministry of Magic, led by Minister of Magic Fudge. Sitting behind Fudge were Rufus Scrimgeour, the head of the Auror Office of the Ministry of Magic, and Kingsley Shacklebolt, an Auror and member of the Order of the Phoenix. Scrimgeour looked like an old lion, with dark brown hair and thick eyebrows with a hint of grey. Behind his gold-rimmed glasses were a pair of sharp eyes, and at first glance he was a sharp and tough guy. Kingsley was a tall, bald, dark-skinned wizard, with a gold earring on one ear. On the right side of the principal's office were Professor Lupin, Sirius Black, Harry and Irina, while Peter Pettigrew, who was tied up, was thrown on the ground between the two camps. At this time, Sirius nodded slightly to Dumbledore, and said in a deep voice, "Yes, Dumbledore, James replaced the secret keeper with Peter Pettigrew at my suggestion that day. We thought that Peter Pettigrew was the least noticeable among us, so we planned to have me as the secret keeper in the open to attract the attention of the Death Eaters, while Peter Pettigrew in the dark would be safe. But we didn't expect that Peter Pettigrew had betrayed us early on." "Nonsense. Sirius Black, it was you who used an explosive spell to kill a muggle on the street that night, and then you were sent to Azkaban prison." Fudge, who was sitting opposite Sirius, said with a glare. If Dumbledore, the greatest white wizard of this century, had not been here, he would not dare to act rashly. Otherwise, he would say anything to make the Dementors give a kiss to the damned criminal in front of him. As long as he lets the Dementors give Sirius a kiss and take away Sirius' soul, then all the right and wrong will be over. He will still be the Minister of Magic loved by the people, and Sirius will still be just a criminal. Professor Lupin said calmly, "Mr. Minister, according to what you said, Peter Pettigrew should have been blown to pieces long ago. How do you explain this Peter Pettigrew who appeared in front of us?" Fudge's face flushed and he shouted, "Maybe Peter Pettigrew took the opportunity to save his life and escaped from the murderer Black. Black is now a criminal. Who knows whether what he said is true or false." At this moment, Harry, who had been silent before, suddenly shouted, "Then why not use legilimency and veritaserum on Sirius and Peter Pettigrew? In this way, we can confirm whether they are lying or not." As Harry's voice fell, Sirius stood up. He looked at Fudge with a calm look and said lightly, "I'm willing to take the veritaserum and confront Peter Pettigrew." Chapter 248, For the Greater Good, All Costs Are Necessary. Fudge hesitated. After seeing Sirius's frank appearance, he had a hunch that the other party might be innocent. However, if Sirius was really innocent, wouldn't it mean that the Ministry of Magic was really as corrupt and incompetent as described in the Quibbler? If this really happened, then Fudge's reputation would probably drop to a new low and be despised by everyone. Thinking of this, Fudge quickly retorted, "According to the regulations of the Ministry of Magic, it is illegal to use legilimency on wizards at will, or force wizards to take veritaserum. You can't do this." Hearing this, Dumbledore, who was sitting behind the desk, had a gleam in his eyes. he said lightly. Corneli, although this is not a real court, I think that, in order to get the truth of the matter, the Ministry of Magic should allow the use of Veritaserum. Ignoring Dumbledore's advice, Fudge refused. No way. Just as everyone was angry because of Fudge's outrageous remarks, the door of the principal's office was suddenly opened. If legilimency and Veritaserum are illegal, then I can use alchemy to achieve a similar effect of Veritaserum and make the suspect tell the truth. I think the Ministry of Magic's laws should not stipulate that it is illegal to use alchemy on wizards, right? Lin said lightly, standing at the door of the principal's office. Hearing this, Fudge was choked for a moment. As Lin said, the British Ministry of Magic, which did not pay much attention to alchemy, had a huge gap in the laws related to alchemy, and naturally there was no so-called law that did not allow wizards to use alchemy. But why do we believe that your alchemy can make the suspect tell the truth? Who knows if you have colluded long ago? Fudge said with specious arguments. He knew very well in his heart that Sirius's case must not be overturned. Otherwise, with the public opinion in the wizarding world that the Ministry of Magic's law enforcement procedures are not standardized, and the internal corruption and incompetence will definitely make him, Cornelius Fudge, step down. Just as Fudge was constantly resolute in his mind, Irina's words shattered his original belief in an instant. Minister Fudge, I think you may not know one thing. Sirius Black was thrown into Azkaban prison without trial. This happened during the tenure of the previous Minister of Magic. It has nothing to do with your wisdom or not. If you can overturn the case for Sirius Black and make Sirius Black's injustice clear, then you will become the most wise and capable Minister of Magic in the eyes of the people. Your reputation will far exceed that of the previous Minister of Magic. Irina said softly. She seemed to be talking about an insignificant matter, but every word she said hit Fudge's heart directly and made Fudge's heart beat. It can be said that Irina's words broke all Fudge's cognition about this matter and made Fudge completely realize it. It turns out that reversing the case will not only not harm one's own interests, but also improve one's reputation by belittling the previous Minister of Magic. At this time, Fudge looked at Irina with enthusiasm. Smart little witch, do you plan to work in the Ministry of Magic after graduation? If you are willing, I can let you be my assistant after you graduate. Fudge said so. Hearing Fudge's words, Hermione and others all looked at Irina with envy. However, facing the solicitation of Fudge, the Minister of Magic, Irina remained calm. She said lightly, Mr. Minister, I still have 4 years to graduate. It may be too early to make a choice now. Hearing this, Fudge nodded seriously and said, indeed, then let's get back to the point. Here are the Minister of Magic, Scrimgeour, the head of the Auror Office, and Dumbledore, the chief wizard of the Wizengamot, as witnesses. After my consideration, I think it is legal to use the truth serum on this occasion. After Fudge gave in, everything became simple. With Fudge's permission, Professor Snape took out a bottle of truth serum from his pocket. He looked at Sirius with disgust and poured a drop of truth serum into Sirius' mouth like feeding a dog. Then, Professor Snape came to Peter Pettigrew and squatted down. He pulled the golden rope that sealed Peter Pettigrew's mouth, pinched his nose with one hand, and poured the truth serum into Peter Pettigrew's mouth with the other hand. When pouring the truth serum for Peter Pettigrew, Professor Snape's hand accidentally shook, and he poured 1/5 of the bottle of truth serum into Peter Pettigrew's mouth. After drinking the truth serum, Sirius and Peter Pettigrew's eyes became dull, and the two of them answered all the questions from the people present. Under the effect of the truth serum, the truth soon came to light. That is, Sirius was innocent, and Peter Pettigrew was the real criminal, who committed a heinous crime that night. Of course, in order to prevent the public from criticizing the Ministry of Magic's irregular law enforcement procedures again, Fudge did not hastily overturn Sirius's case and convict Peter Pettigrew, but decided to hold a formal trial for this case at the Wizengamot the next day. No one had any objections to this, except Peter Pettigrew, who had his mouth tied again and could not speak. Since Lin and Irina were considered parties to this case, they were also allowed to go to the Wizengamot to observe the trial. Since the final exam week was over, the young wizards began to party and had no classes to attend, and Dumbledore did not stop them from thinking, but acquiesced to their behavior of observing the trial. Perhaps because Irina's words in the principal's office were deeply rooted in Fudge's heart, the result of this trial did not happen unexpectedly. Sirius, who had been wronged for more than 10 years, was vindicated and acquitted, while Peter Pettigrew had his order of mail-in taken back and was sentenced to life imprisonment in Azkaban prison. Such a result made Harry and his friends cheer on the spot, while Lin and Irina looked at everything that happened in the audience with deep eyes. Unlike Harry and his friends who were carefree, Lin and Irina knew that things were not over yet. They still needed to create a riot on the way to Azkaban prison, where Peter Pettigrew was being transported, so that Peter Pettigrew could escape and keep his fate in their hands. Admittedly, Peter Pettigrew's escape and Voldemort's resurrection were not what Lin and Irina wanted subjectively, and the emergence of these two events would also lead to many people being implicated or even killed. But for the greater good, all costs are necessary. Chapter 249. The Winged Demon Gets Injured Again. Perhaps because Peter Pettigrew's case was directly related to Fudge's reputation and affected Fudge's vital interests. After Peter Pettigrew was found guilty, the Ministry of Magic did not procrastinate as usual, but sent a team of Aurors to escort him to Azkaban prison the next day. This Auror team has a total of 10 Aurors, among which the 3 leading ones are elite Aurors, and the 2 Aurors at the end of the team are new Aurors who have just joined the team, and are considered to be new Aurors who have just joined the team to see the world. In order not to affect ordinary wizards and muggles, the route taken by this Auror team to escort Peter Pettigrew to Azkaban prison avoids all wizard settlements and muggle cities. They need to cross a deserted primeval forest, reach the seaside, and then take a boat to the island, where Azkaban prison is located. After learning about the escort route of the Auror team from the Ministry of Magic officials contacted by the Rowell family, Lin and Irina scouted the primeval forest in advance, and arrived at the depths of the primeval forest before the Auror team the next day. Although the vacation of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry has not yet begun, it is naturally not difficult for Lin and Irina to sneak out after the final exams. After all, as long as they can return to the dormitory on time at night, and are only absent during the day, even if the professors find out, they probably just think that the two of them sneaked to Hogsmeade to play. After Sirius was vindicated, the Dementors originally sent to Hogsmeade were evacuated, which made Hogsmeade once again become the paradise for little wizards. There are not a few little wizards who sneak to Hogsmeade to play after the final exams, and the professors naturally will not make a fuss about the addition of 2 of them. If the information from the Ministry of Magic is correct, this Auror team will arrive at our location in a quarter of an hour. Lin glanced at the parchment in his hand and said to Irina beside him with a serious look. Irina nodded slightly, and her voice as clear as a spring came over. Understood. And in order to prevent our identities from being exposed, you'd better not use fire magic and alchemy in the battle later, and I won't use ice magic. In this way, even if the Ministry of Magic knows that the Auror team has been attacked, it will not be suspected of us. Hearing this, Lin gestured to show his agreement. Although in the eyes of the Ministry of Magic, they stood with Sirius yesterday and hated Peter Pettigrew, so they had no motive to rescue Peter Pettigrew, but the magic they were good at was too iconic. Let's not talk about elemental magic, just Lin's alchemy alone. In the entire British magic world, except for Dumbledore, I'm afraid that only Lin can defeat the elite Aurors with pure alchemy. When Lin En and Irina dealt with Quirrell 2 years ago, and the Basilisk a year ago, the strength of their fire and ice magic was even more shocking. Even the fire and ice magic of the professors at Hogwarts Castle, except for Dumbledore, probably no one could reach their level. In this case, if Lin En and Irina still use their iconic abilities, it would be no different from exposing themselves on the spot. However, even if Lin En and Irina could not use their iconic abilities, they were not worried that their actions would be exposed. After all, after studying the black magic books on the 4th floor of Rowell Castle, their black magic level was no less than that of some black wizards in Nocturne Alley. Not only that, Lin En and Irina still had some cards that had not been exposed, such as Lin En's time magic using the sands of time, and Irina's magical talent for affinity with animals and plants. At this time, Lin En's expression changed. After making a gesture to Irina beside him, he waved his wand and made his figure disappear into the air. Seeing Lin En's actions, Irina's expression also froze. She cast a layer of disillusionment spell on herself and then cast her eyes into the distance. On a slope more than 200 meters away, 10 auras were walking slowly towards the direction of the two people, and surrounded by them was Peter Pettigrew, whose hands were bound by special magic chains. After yesterday's trial and today's long journey, Peter Pettigrew looked much more haggard, and his eyes were full of despair. He thought he might have to live in Azkaban prison forever. You know, after learning that Sirius escaped from Azkaban prison by using an imagus, the Ministry of Magic made adjustments on the spot to all prisoners in Azkaban and those who were about to be escorted to Azkaban. The chain locked on Peter Pettigrew's hand, which made him completely unable to cast spells, was a decision made by the Ministry of Magic. With the help of this chain, even Peter Pettigrew could not escape by transforming into a mouse. Just as the group was about to move forward, suddenly, a black shadow passed in front of them, and a rustling sound of leaves being brushed came from the woods in front. The rustling sound kept approaching the direction of the Aura team. Beware. Seeing this scene, the three elite auras walking in the front shouted at the same time. They raised their wands with vigilance and stopped. After realizing that the target of the black shadow was him, one of the elite auras ordered without hesitation, attack. Expelliarmus. As the elite aura's voice fell, a fillet red beams were almost emitted at the same time, shooting towards the black shadow, and after these 8 red beams, there were 2 red beams that were slightly delayed. Obviously, the 2 new auras have not yet completed the running in with the other auras in this team, and they cannot achieve the same attack rhythm as other auras for the time being. These auras looked at the disarming spell they had just issued with expectation, hoping to hit the uninvited guest who came from nowhere. However, they were disappointed. They saw the black shadow tumbling several times in the air and dodging the 10 disarming spells very easily. By this time, it was too late for the auras to continue attacking. The black shadow showed its true appearance in front of the auras. It was a creature like a giant butterfly. It pounced on an elite aura and smeared its entire body on his face before he was caught off guard. Winged devil. Damn. How could there be a winged devil in this forest? After seeing the full appearance of this strange creature, the other auras were all shocked. They subconsciously stepped back and pointed their wands at the winged devil that was smeared on the elite aura's face. Chapter 250. I have to cry. However, after the winged demon succeeded in its attack, it did not linger in the fight, but immediately flew into the air and disappeared from the sight of the auras. As for the elite aura who was hit in the face by the winged demon, he shook his head and came to his senses. I'm fine. The elite aura looked at his hands in surprise. He couldn't believe that he was safe and sound. You know, the winged demon, a magical animal with a danger level of XXXXX, feeds on human brains, and he was intact after being hit in the face by the winged demon. This was simply a miracle in his eyes. Just when these auras thought that the appearance of the winged demon was just an accident, more accidents appeared. Wait, what the hell is that thing in front? At this time, an aura pointed at the cabbage-like things falling from the sky in front of him and shouted loudly. Suddenly, a huge mouth opened in the middle of the cabbage-like things, revealing rows of densely packed sharp teeth. The cabbages kept jumping on the ground and rushed towards the 10 auras. Looking at these terrifying looking cabbages, an elite aura soon recognized their identities. He retreated backwards and shouted, "This is Chinese biting cabbage. Retreat quickly and burn it with a fire spell." Hearing the words of this elite aura, the other 9 auras all showed fear in their eyes. Chinese biting cabbage is one of the most dangerous magical plants. If you are bitten by it, you will lose a piece of meat or a broken leg at the least, or blood will splatter on the spot. Thinking of this, the movements of these auras also became agile. They quickly retreated and stretched out their wands to point at the Chinese biting cabbages in front of them. Flames are blazing. The 10 auras shouted at the same time, and fierce flames rose up and devoured the Chinese biting cabbages on the ground. However, just when they thought that these Chinese biting cabbages were about to be burned to death by their magic flames, something strange happened again. Die unconscious. A cold voice sounded from dozens of meters away, and a purple beam of light broke through the air, passing through the raging fire in an instant, hitting a novice aura at the end of the aura team, and knocking him unconscious. The remaining 9 auras looked towards the source of the sound, and saw 2 figures in black robes appearing beside a crooked tree not far in front of their vision, with black hoods covering the faces of the 2 people in shadow. And the coma spell just now was cast by the petite black-robed man. Sure enough, when the 9 auras saw the 2 black-robed men, these 2 words appeared in their minds at the same time. If the 9 auras thought it was an accident when the curled winged demon appeared before, then when the curled winged demon attacked the elite aura and the elite aura was completely unharmed, they suspected that the curled winged demon was artificially raised. Otherwise, there are very few winged demons that can restrain their nature and not devour the enemy's brains, but instead flee immediately after playing a prank on their faces. Moreover, after seeing those Chinese biting cabbages rushing towards them, the suspicion in the hearts of the auras became deeper and deeper. Who are you? How dare you come to rob prisoners from the Ministry of Magic? An elite aura shouted. The 2 black-robed men did not speak, but another black-robed man raised his wand and pointed it at the ground, whispering coldly, "All curses are over." The invisible magic power spread in all directions, and after contacting the magic flame summoned by the auras, it completely extinguished them. Seeing this scene, Irina, who was beside Lin En, finally breathed a sigh of relief. She had just thrown away all her Chinese biting cabbages. That was all her family assets. If those auras burned them, she would inevitably cry when she returned. Fortunately, Lin En used the end of all curses to extinguish the magic flames and saved her few assets. In fact, with Lin En's control over the flames, he could completely extinguish the magic flames with a thought, but in order to prevent the other party from noticing anything, he could only use the complicated method of the end of all curses to achieve the same goal. After extinguishing the flames, Lin En did not hesitate to act. He raised the wand in his hand and shouted, "Smash to pieces." A grey-white light broke through the air and rushed straight to the elite aura standing in the front. Facing this crushing spell, the elite aura just waved his wand calmly, released a silent armor spell, and then backhandedly cast a silent disarming spell. Perhaps when facing extremely dangerous magical animals and magical plants such as the winged demon and the Chinese biting cabbage, these elite auras would be panicked, but when facing those dark wizards, these elite auras would be very calm. Because that was their area of expertise, they had seen too many dark wizards and dark magic, so they naturally wouldn't be as panicked as they were at the beginning. Lin turned his head to avoid the disarming spell, and waved his wand to cast a silent stun spell. The elite aura also dodged sideways. However, Lin and Irina didn't come here to fight with the auras. Their purpose was just to create chaos and let Peter Pettigrew go. How could they be obsessed with a duel between magic? Exclamation mark. When the elite aura dodged sideways, the long-lost curled winged demon appeared again. The curled winged demon turned into a man-eating shadow and actually rushed out from the side of the woods in the direction where the elite aura flashed and threw the elite aura to the ground, petrified. Seeing that the little curled winged demon succeeded in one blow, Irina did not hesitate to add a full body binding spell, fixing the elite aura in place like a stone, unable to move. Meanwhile, Lin used the dual technique of hiding spells. He cast a stunning spell after a crushing spell and sent it to another rookie aura at the end of the team. After all, the rookie aura had just joined the team and was not so familiar with the magic skills of some wizards in battle. He did not notice the purple beam hidden at the end of the grey-white crushing spell. He simply released an shield spell to resist the crushing spell and then tried to organize a counter-attack against Lin. However, after Lin's crushing spell and his shield spell were broken at the same time, the purple beam hidden behind the crushing spell finally burst into life. The purple beam hit the rookie aura's chest firmly and knocked him unconscious. However, after just a few rounds of fighting, the aura team lost 2 more members. The enemy's strength made the remaining 7 auras feel very difficult. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.